Members, that's us live and we're just about to kick off. So it's Annandale Eskdale Area Committee. It's Wednesday, 28th of May. We're in Annandale Hall. It's just gone 10:30. Right, members, just so we're absolutely clear, this meeting will be getting recorded and it's getting broadcast live on our website. I've just splashed myself with water, so my papers are a wee bit messy if I get a wee bit mixed up at times. So members may notice that when calling members to speak, I will refer to them formally and using their title, example Councillor Smith, so that is clear who are councillors and who in the process by elimination are officers, and so on and so forth. Members just would be reminded just to use the good practice guidance. First item on the agenda is setting out apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation, which I'll do that first. And Tracy, I'll hand over to you for setting out apologies, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Morning, members. We've got 9 members present in total. We've got 6 present here in Annandale Town Hall, being the Chair, Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Jamieson, Councillor Mayo, Councillor Wilson and Luke Graham, our Youth Councillor for Annandale East and Eskdale. We've got 3 members present on Microsoft Teams, being the Vice Chair, Councillor Davis and Councillor Thompson. I have got 2 apologies, one from Councillor Karen Colours and one from Kelsey Zwolinski, our Youth Councillor. And 2 members not present at the start of the meeting is Councillor McGregor and Councillor Marshall. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so we've got apologies for Councillor Marshall there. Thanks very much for that, Archie. Thanks very much, Tracy, too, and a very warm welcome, Luke, for coming again. It's good to see you here again, too, in particular. So, declaration of interest, stroke, declaration, statement of connection, I should say, members. So, looking within the room, don't see anybody within the room that's got any declarations or statements. I'll just give a wee second for online. If for some reason, members, something comes up at any point through the meeting, you just bring it to my attention, we'll note it at that point. Minute of the previous meeting date is 26th of March. It's for approval, members. Is it members minded to approve that? Yeah, approve. That's it. Agreed. Thank you. Thanks very much. Item number 4 is 1st April. Right, and our first report in real terms, we've been asked to consider today as the end of the year performance report from the Education, Skills and Community Wellbeing Directorate in relation to performance in Annandale Eskdale. Within the report, members will note feedback from HMIE inspections, in 4 schools in Annandale and Eskdale and 2 early year settings. I'm conscious that there are many strengths highlighted through these inspections, but I would also like to hear of the challenges and any areas for development within these settings. Perhaps this can be touched on when I open up for members' debate. Just about there. So I'd like to a very warm welcome to the head teacher from Moffat Academy, Tara Woods, and the head teacher from Annan Academy, Ewan Murray, who are also in the hall along with Karen Bride and Alison Chambers. And they're here to answer any questions from members, comments and so on and so forth. So what I'll do, for anything to add to the report at all from anyone? If no, nothing to add to the report that's here, so then I'll go straight to members, and if that's the case. Members, Councillor Jamieson, George.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I welcome this report. I also welcome that we have, over the last couple of years, we've been more specific about Annandale and Eskdale issues rather than Dumfries and Galloway issues, which is really, really welcome. I've got sort of 3 questions, Chair, if you bear with me, but it touches on some of the things you mentioned. And the first thing I say is I've got massive respect for all the directorate, teaching staff and auxiliary staff, etc. in the schools. I think they do a great job. We just need to give more resources to it, and then we can do it better, and that's up to us. On page 17, and under the recommendations 2.3, consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the Relevant Service Committee. I brought this up previously, and in previous meetings we have had indicators that suggest that Annandale and Eskdale are a good few percent behind the rest of Dumfries and Galloway, and bearing in mind Dumfries and Galloway is quite a bit behind the Scottish local benchmarking, local government benchmarking. So I would like us to consider that there are considerable variations in Annandale and Annandale and Eskdale's education, skills and community wellbeing. And I hasten to ask, community wellbeing is very much part of that committee now, which expands the range of stuff that we've got to get through, which is quite demanding for members and I would imagine the officials as well. So that's kind of my first ask, which is probably the most important one, Chair. I'm also hugely impressed by the inspection reports, especially some of the ones that I've got particular knowledge of, and I'll have to identify Lockerbie Academy. I know that the work that's been done there sorry, Lockerbie Primary School. The work that's been done there has been tough, but it's bearing fruit now, hopefully. But just to pick on what the Chair said, I think there's also a need, and I've mentioned this before, that we want candour. So as well as and I don't want to identify bad inspections and things like that, but we really need to know the whole picture and not just be shown things that are going well, albeit that's the things we can build on. So I think we just need a little bit more balance and candour there. If we turn to page 24, and I know we don't have the data yet available for just now, but the downward trend in the senior phase in Annandale and Eskdale, and I do acknowledge that there's 4 schools and it's an average, and every school's got different challenges and opportunities, etc., etc. But the trend is downwards, and I know one of the ambitions going forward from Assistant Director Jim Brown is that we will look at the performance of senior schools. My concern is to raise the outcomes, and I know these particularly concentrate on SQA, etc., etc. But there is quite a huge difference. Take that word huge, but there is a significant difference between the school's outcomes, and I know there is socioeconomic, etc., etc. But I would like us to consider: is there other reasons? Is there specific reasons, etc., etc.? And could we improve that by balancing or rebalancing teacher-pupil ratios, things like that, and ASN support? And I know that PEF does that already, but there's a big difference between the performance of the schools. So that's on page 24, where all the indicators are going down, covering National 5, National 6, etc., etc. And the last point I would like to make is on exclusion. Again, Annandale and Eskdale looks to be excluding more children than others, and it's a wider question than that. And I know I've spoken to Ewan many times about the challenges of inclusion and exclusion and the balance you have. But in the reports, the 2023 report from government, and also the audit on ASN by Audit Scotland, it did reflect on the fact that inclusion is a challenge for the teachers, in that pupils who are included can be disruptive with other children. And 3 of the big issues that was raised by teachers in this research project was low-level disruption in class, which affects the ability of the teacher and the other children to learn, and the restorative actions, where do the schools have the resources to manage effectively the children that have the problems that are causing problems for other people. So that's the question, and the third question. So the first question is, through the Chair, could we ask the officers to look specifically at Annandale and Eskdale, work with the head teachers to see, is there anything specific that's causing the performance to be what looks like lower than the other areas of Dumfries and Galloway? And even it's very difficult to compare, for example, Moffat with Langham or Annan with Langham, but there must be some commonality there. And there must be some specifics that we can do in each of the schools to raise the standards, whatever they are. So it's being candid, have a review, being candid, and look at the particular issues that inclusion and exclusion has on schools like Annan Academy. I know Ewan's done a lot of work on that. So that's the 3 sort of areas that I'm really interested in, Chair. Sorry for saying too many words, but that's the 3 areas that I'm interested in, with specific reference to Annandale and Eskdale, which I think could be used as a pilot for the entirety of Dumfries and Galloway to look at these variations. Thank you.
Just before you come in, so that this will obviously be quite free-flowing. So if it would just the same as usual. So if you've got a particular point you asked after answering the first question, just come back and let it be free-flowing, because there's only 2 or 3 really big items, and I think it's potentially one of them today. So I can. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, commentary, and in your questions, Councillor Jameson. For me, I've picked up, and you'll keep me right if I've not picked up, the first ask was around that, consider the aspects of performance at much more granular detail across the 4 schools. That absolutely can be done, and we know there's work going on in terms of what is the actions of area committees and how we get that data to you in a much more timely fashion. But I think it's also about the level of data that you're getting and how we can work with our elected members to ensure that you've got that data and time. So there's work in progress. We know we had the elected member seminar that was looking at that high level data on Friday, but again, it's like what's next in terms of how we're reporting our performance, so that you actually get a real understanding of the schools that you're working in the communities of, and not just at that sort of broad brush approach from LGBF. So that's where we are. We know it's work in progress. We're very open to have those discussions in the right format that is acceptable to all area committees and to our elected members. So that's where we are. We have that data. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of how we have the data in one platform. We currently have it in different bits, and so therefore we're doing work behind doors to try and ensure that there's things that you can click, hopefully, and be able to see this is Annan or this is Moffat, and then do that comparison. So it's work in progress for that, but there's been a lot of conversations around data in the past 12 months, both from elected members and from officers and within our own team within schools and quality. So that's part one of the question, and hopefully that answers that. If I then take you to the part around attainment, and you spoke about how there is variation, there's variability within the attainment, we absolutely acknowledge that. And again, through the work of the elected members and the aligned timetable, where we've got equity of offer across all of our schools, we know we're moving to a new timetable on Monday for all of our secondary schools, where all S4 pupils will be doing 7 subjects within S4. That therefore reduces the variability, because we had schools that were doing 6, we had schools that were doing 8, so therefore to have a platform where they're all doing at least 7, then that will hopefully help to improve the attainment, because the more that you do, and then that platform to allow you to then take that to level 6 will then help with our attainment data. So there is work that's been done across all of our schools, from the officer side of it, to ensure that equity of offers there, giving young people the opportunity to then have the right qualifications to be able to then attain better. In terms of the results that then that produces, that then comes back to the schools, and that's us working with our schools to understand the standards, to ensure that they are then making sure young people are coursed right, and we are confident that our schools are working with their children, with the young people and with their parents, to make sure that the offer to them is the right offer, that they are doing the work within the broad general education to ensure that there is courses that then give them that platform to allow them to then be successful in their senior schools. That was the second part. There was a part that you put in between, which was around, just keep me right, inspection, in terms of you're happy to read the information about the inspection reports and the positives. The way in which we are asked to report to you, we're only asked to report strengths. We're not asked to report for areas for improvement. So therefore, again, that would come back to yourself to say, we are happy to report on whatever we're asked to report on, but we are constrained within the reports that we are asked to share with yourselves. So it's not that, again, if you look at any of the HMI inspection reports or care inspection reports, you will see that it always starts with the strengths, and then they'll give areas for improvement. So they are there, they are a public document, but in terms of how we're asked to report to yourselves within area committees, it's strengths that we're asked to share with you. I'm then going to hand over to Karen, who's going to give you a bit more information around exclusions, and then I'll ask both the head teachers to sort of give you their views, if that's okay with you, Chair, in terms of their school sort of picture.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Councillor Jimson. I just want to build a wee bit on what Alison said there in relation to inspection reports, because the inspection reports, when they're published, there is an ask that we ask that they are sent to the ward members. So it's just to check that you are receiving those on publication day. As I'm saying, they are sent to the Chief Executive, the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Education Committee, as well as ward members. So you should be receiving a notification when all inspection reports are published. So if that's not happening, please let me know, because they are circulated with you, so you can access the full report and the more detailed summary of findings that schools receive as well. In relation to the exclusions, yes, there has been, as you noted, an increase, and what I'll do is I'll give you sort of more detail of the numbers, because as you know, exclusions are presented as a rate, so you can sort of look at that in comparator. So in Annandale and Eskdale, 11 primary schools excluded pupils, and out of that, 35 pupils in total were excluded. So in our primaries, 35 different pupils out of 2,455 pupils were excluded. And in the 4 secondary schools, 59 pupils in total were excluded, but there were 83 exclusions because 14 pupils had more than one exclusion. So in our secondary schools, there were 59 pupils out of 2,207 who were excluded. In relation to our looked after exclusions, we have a small number of looked after pupils in Annandale and Eskdale, and there is a very small number of exclusions, but because the way that is multiplied up to give you the rate, it looks like there has been a significant increase. What I can assure you is there has been a very small increase, and it is that small that the figures are so small I can't actually share the numbers because it could potentially identify people. So it was just to give you that reassurance around our looked after exclusions. As you know, you'll have heard me say before that the purpose of an exclusion is to reconvene a plan around a child or a young person, or to create a plan around a child or a young person to ensure that they can attend school safely and for themselves and for the pupils around them. And in relation to any exclusions for looked after pupils, any exclusion for a looked after pupil that is being considered has to be discussed and approved by the head of service before that takes place. To pick up on your points around sort of that GIRFEC question, Councillor Jimison, you know, I was up at the Scottish Attainment Challenge Leeds meeting last week, and that was, again, one of the very areas that was being discussed, again, at a national level. It's the balance for inclusion, which absolutely we are committed to, but it's ensuring that that there is minimum impact on other learners. And we do understand and appreciate that at times some of our other learners are impacted. But again, we put as many mitigations in place as possible to try and reduce that. And you are aware of the fact that we have increased training through Framework for Inclusion, not only for our teaching staff, but also for our support staff as well, in order to support the number of needs that our young people are displaying. So I'll now stop and pass over to either Mr. Murray first and then Mrs. Woods.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the panel. Certainly from my perspective, we work very closely with the local authority, looking at our planning, looking at our attainment. It starts off with an evaluation which we've introduced this year, where the Chief Education Officer, Jim Brown and Alison, sits and rigorously analyses where we are with our attainment agenda, looks at the data. It's all very much data driven, and it's making sure that we have an eye on where we are going, why. So we understand the data, we know where we're going, we project it, but more importantly, we actually improve. And that improvement agenda is absolutely something that's been supported with the aligned timetable, with the introduction of the 7 subjects, etc. It means that equity of offer will ultimately work through and absolutely raise attainment in certain areas, certainly within our setting. We have an ongoing process of school improvement whereby improvement officers visit the school, they're in, they look in classrooms, they look at the quality of learning and teaching, they challenge us on our standards and qualities, our school improvement plan. These are all public documents as well. And it's a very transparent and rigorous process. And I think we're going to see fruits of our labour within that process. The difficulty is anything that we do in education, it's not an instant impact. It can maybe take 1-2 years to work through the system when you're changing systematic changes such as curriculum offerings, etc. But yeah, I think looking forward it's going to be a positive trend.
Hi, thanks for having me back again. So Mr. Murray started with talking about what we do at a local authority level to raise attainment and look at the standards and quality. So I thought it might be helpful if I spoke to some of the things that we do in our schools to support young people in achieving all that they can. So at Moffat Academy, we've got a wide range of things that we do to support learners. We implemented what's called Academic Snapshot, and this was off the back of parents and caregivers wanting to know more real-time updates on how their young person's doing in school. So we have that as an ongoing basis for all of our young people in S3 to S6. We have Learner of the Month across all of our subjects where young people are nominated for their efforts. We have academic mentoring for students who we feel need that little bit of extra nurture with their learning. And we also have this targeting boys only. We also make use of the Achieve platform, and all staff have had professional learning in that. One of the things that's unique to our setting is we have silent study, where we open the school on Wednesday evenings from 6 till 8, and in the dark months between Christmas and Easter, we open the school on Saturdays from 1 till 4, and that's staffed by volunteering staff, including primary teachers. And we also provide a warm snack, etc., to encourage young people, and they maybe don't have a warm enough space at home that's quiet and conducive to study. We run termly senior reflection progress workshops where we challenge young people to set targets for themselves that they seal in an envelope, revisit them to find out where they were hoping to be this time next term. We have our 3 tracking reports, 2 parents' evenings. One of the things that we feel is really important is an understanding of additional support needs in our setting. So at Moffat Academy, we've got 58% of our young people in secondary have got additional support needs. Now, we don't believe that that's because we have a different cohort. We believe that's because we know our learners really well, and we identify the needs that they have and then put in place supports for that. We buy in standardised testing to ensure that young people are carrying on progressively from where they leave off in primary right through their BGE journey through S1 to S3. Young people have an optional entitlement to ICT support with their SQA exams. We make sure that that entitlement is enacted in every situation. And the other one we do is our teachers give over their non-contact time to supervise study periods for the senior school. We don't allow young people to sign out. That's quite unique to our setting in that we feel if young people sign out, there'll be some of our learners going home to a space where they can progress well with their learning, and others won't have that safe, warm space and quiet to do that. So that was for equity. On attendance, the big change for us that's been fantastic is the support from the local authority. In terms of data, we now get monthly reports. That's been for just over the past year, I think, coming out every month, showing us all of the attendance data for both primary and secondary for all schools across the local authority. That enables you to benchmark yourself, but also look at your local primaries to see what kind of support is going to come through to the secondary sector. So these toolkits have been absolutely fantastic, and it enables us to update our staff in real time. On exclusions, it would have to be something very, very serious for head teacher to consider that to be the only sort of supportive mechanism we can put in place for a young person, and it is never used as a consequence. It's to enact efficient and suitable planning for a young person, and it's not a decision a head teacher would ever make on their own. It would have to involve the team around the child, and as my colleagues have said, if it is a young person who is looked after, I would need my head of services permission. But we do everything we can to prevent that from happening by having strong relationships and expectations policy across the school. We've had support from the local authority in nurture training, and we are supported by the framework for intervention, and we make sure that our young people have got robust planning in place so that we don't get to a stage where decisions have to be made around exclusion. And also my colleague Alison has spoken about the curriculum picture. That is very, very important to make sure learners are accessing courses and learning opportunities that are right for them. Thank you.
I'm quite happy for others to ask any questions on the back of that, and I know all that work's going on, and I'm being devil's advocate, I'm being grumpy old man. Closing the attainment gap's a real challenge. And all the things that you talked about are admirable and spot on. But if a child comes from a poorer home, disruptive background, etc., we know from the stats that a lot of these children are getting left behind, children and young people are getting left behind, and it's a real challenge. And Annandale's a good case in the SIMD situation. So it's how we can close that attainment gap, and contradict me if I'm wrong, but I know that one of the things that Ewan's concerned about was lack of aspiration in some of the young people in the area, and it's how to close the attainment gap and raise that expectation and get equity for children that come from poorer backgrounds to overgeneralise. That's really important to me. And the other thing about exclusions and inclusions is that the ASN resource, I know you've kindly agreed that we need more training, and that was discussed very heavily at the committees, and we have a new system of allocation of ASN, but the budget is the budget, and mostly the budget covers stage 4 children with a limited ability to look after 3, 2s and 1s. And again, overgeneralising, these are the children that might fall into a stage 4 or become disruptive. So how can schools manage and teachers manage that? There's an expectation that with extra training, the teachers can manage 40% of their class that have got ASN problems. And I've checked up the Education Act, and the list of ASN symptoms is quite extensive. So my question is, how can we expect our teachers to teach such diverse classes without maybe all the pupils getting less than the teacher would like them to have? And I don't think that's anecdotal, because there's a lot of teacher feedback across the country that says that they feel they can't do their best for the children because of lack of support within the class and out with the class, so that they can give their best to all the children. That's back to the GIRFEC thing. How do you look after all the children? That's a very long question, and I don't want to dominate anything, so I'll be quiet now. But I'm really keen to see how we can close that attainment gap beyond what the government funds to what we can do ourselves.
So the reason I was coming here to say I'd leave it free flowing, because it was a question I had myself, that it's the actual impact that additional support needs in that learning that those extra teachers make on impact. But I'd rather that come to the 2 head teachers first, if you don't mind, and then it come back to yourselves after that, if that's okay, George? Yep. So by that question, if you don't mind, 2 head teachers first, then come back to yourselves.
Okay, so we have a PEF allocation, and it's obviously a little bit smaller because our role at Moffat Academy and Moffat Primary is smaller. However, we use all of that to support closing that gap for children and young people who otherwise would struggle to access all that they can. We've invested our PEF last year and for the coming session in primary in having a support for learning teacher additionality, and that has helped our young people who are at risk of missing out or not attaining to have targeted interventions either delivered by that teacher or the learning assistants that have been supported and upskilled by our additional support for learning member of staff. So this can either work within the classroom setting and small group work, or it can be on an extraction basis, whatever is most appropriate to work on closing numeracy and closing literacy gap sort of projects. We are expected with our PEF spend to have really specific groups of young people that we work with, and we're expected to show impact for the investment that we are putting into this, and we have to report in our standards and quality report very lengthy, detailed explanations about how we've got best value for that money. In secondary, the other thing that we do in both primary and secondary is we have PEF money aside for young people to access all aspects of school life and wider achievement opportunities. So if there's any equipment that they need or subsidies or resources, that no child is missing out because they can't afford to do something. In secondary, the additional bit that we've got is we are working with local partners. An example of that, am I allowed to say a name of a local partner? Mm-hmm. Is Kyantics at Moffat. We had a pilot project ongoing with a small group of young people who were needing to learn in a different way. And that was very kindly supported by the local authority with the inclusion team, and it's something which is being rolled out to schools which are in Annandale and Eskdale, because we were able to evidence positive outcomes for those children and young people involved in that. So it's about really knowing your learners, knowing the gaps that you're trying to close and the progress that you're seeking to make, knowing your community and your local partners and linking with them, because you want children to stay in the community that they live. And it's bringing all of that together to make sure that they are learning in a way that's right for them, that teachers and the support staff around them know what that looks like and are working positively to achieve that, and that head teachers and schools are accountable for that PEF spend which we're given.
Thank you very much. In a similar way, we have a massive reliance on our PEF fund to try and bridge that gap, and it's how we target it. In Annan, we have again put all our PEF fund into resourcing staff and provision for young people so that we can actually ensure that they leave with the correct number of qualifications. And it's about starting right from the beginning and creating an environment that's nurturing, welcoming. It's alternative in many ways. Staff can work in a flexible way with parents, with young people. It meets the needs of young people in terms of their emotional needs and also sometimes their social, economical needs with parents, etc. We do some targeted work as they progress through the school. This year, for example, we'd identified upwards of 20 young people who were in danger of leaving school with minimal qualifications, if not any, because they were disengaged, disaffected, or through mental health and health reasons couldn't attend school. So through the programmes of inclusion and working with our support mentors, we've managed to work with, I think, 22 of these young people and made sure that they've all got 5 National 4 qualifications and progression onto a positive destination through colleges, through training programmes, etc. And it's that focused intervention work that the PEF fund allows us to put in, that additionality that allows us to do. It's not enough, so therefore we've actually created a pilot programme which has now been running for 2 years really successfully, called the Gurfic Forum, and that's where we actually look out to partners and we work with social work, health, police, educational psychology, youth, and once every 2 months we come around the table and we talk about young people who are identifying crisis in their life for different reasons. It's damaging their progression in education. And we look at what resources and what interventions other services can help. So we have a targeted, holistic approach. It's a one-stop, one-door approach, and it's very much the philosophy of local solutions for local problems. And it's to try and put that targeted support in early enough to support young people to get them back on track so that they are able to achieve. But both PEF and working with local agencies is absolutely crucial to everything we do.
Thank you. And just to give you a bit of a snapshot of how we are supporting our schools and our teachers and our staff within the schools, just to give you a bit of background, some of the measures that are used to closing the poverty-related attainment gap, one of them is measuring the difference between the attainment of pupils in quintile 1 and in quintile 5. And it's worth noting that in Dumfries and Galloway, I haven't got the breakdown for Annandale and Eskdale, unfortunately, but for Dumfries and Galloway, 10% of our pupils reside in quintile 1 and 10% of our pupils reside in quintile 5. So that leaves another 80% of pupils that we are aware of that live within quintiles 2, 3 and 4 who are experiencing poverty. So we support and we challenge our schools to identify what is their own poverty-related attainment gap. And we use markers such as free school meal entitlement. However, we appreciate that has its flaws as well, because with the introduction of the universal free school meal offering, we have some families who then don't apply for free school meal, which would identify these children as being free meal entitled. We do ask our schools to identify particular family groupings as well, to identify areas of potential poverty, as well as their local knowledge of their families and the pupils within those families to help do that. So it's very difficult for us to have, and again, it was a conversation we picked up on last week nationally, is having those standardised measures. We appreciate that quintile 1 versus quintile 5 was picked as the marker option, but it very often is not a true reflection of that poverty-related attainment gap. However, as you said, we do receive funding, and what are we doing with that funding? So some of the strategic equity funding is used for our officers to support and challenge schools with identifying that poverty-related attainment gap within their schools and the spend and how they are making best use of that spend to make sure it really is targeting the pupils that the spend is intended for. In addition to that, we have nurture teachers who have been employed, and our nurture teachers are working with children and young people to support those. And some of those children come under those categories that you identify there, Councillor Jimison, those who would perhaps be identified at stages 1 and 2, stages of intervention. And it would hope with that earlier intervention, there's that chance these young people perhaps do not progress to become pupils who would identify at stages 3 and 4. And in addition to working with the young people, there's a lot of building capacity within the staff as well, because there is that expectation that pupils at stages 1 and 2, their needs are met by their classroom teachers. So again, we have inclusive practice PTs, as well as delivering on the wider umbrella of inclusive practice. They do deliver training for teachers and support staff specifically to literacy and numeracy, with strategies that are there to deliver the curriculum in an accessible way, to identify potential barriers that learners have, and strategies to help the young people overcome those barriers to identify the curriculum. And again, we have our inclusive practice leads now in every single school in partnership who have undergone training. Schools have been offered 2 hours of inclusive practice training. And in addition to that, there is a self-evaluation toolkit on inclusive practice that is supported by a follow-up report and support from the inclusive practice leads. So bespoke support can be offered to individual schools and settings as and when they need it to help them support the young people in their schools.
I think most things have been said, but just so in summary, what I would suggest is that there are systems, there's processes, and there's people at every level of trying to ensure that we are closing that poverty-related attainment gap, as well as making sure that we are making the best use of the budgets that we are given.
Thank you. So, George, what about the Councillor Driver then, Thompson? Archie?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm going to do the kiss, kick, kiss situation. So, and that's basically, thanks very much for all of your responses here for Councillor Jamison's questions and the additional issues that you've actually responded to as well. I'm looking at page 25 and Annandale Eskdale school exclusion rates for looked after children per 1,000. And it's got target 111 and the value is 115, yet it's a green tick. And I think that should be a yellow or a red. I'd just like to understand why that is. And regarding the root cause of some of these things, some of the issues that come to my mind are composite classes. Does the teacher have enough time for each of the individual children within those composite classes? You said there was, the exclusions about, and the question that came to my mind was, were any of the exclusions about abuse to teaching staff? And what sort of things are in place for that? And sort of finally, obviously it takes a community to raise a child rather than just a school. And you did mention you had some partnerships and things like that going on. What other partnerships have you got with the local community rather as local businesses?
Thank you, Councillor Drivers. I'll answer the first part around your question around the exclusion and the green tick. The green tick is what Pintana churned out because the measurement was that it was within an acceptable progress of the target. We don't actually have control over the status of the items. It's Pintana that creates those for us. But as you've said, it is, the value is higher than the target. And that's what it is. But as I did say to you, as far as the looked after pupils on that one there, it is a very small number, and I'll happily have a conversation with you around our looked after exclusions, but as I'm saying, because of the very small number, it could potentially be identified.
Just before you come back, do you know what the margin is? Is it 10, 15, 20%? I suppose there'll be an indicative figure of that. To me, I'm just, when I looked at that, actually, sorry, just to get an understanding, a similar point, but so 111 to target, 115 or so is the outcome. So that's a very small percentage. When you look at the ones above, it's 80 and 95.3. We look at that, there are really within about 10% or so, even 15, 20%, but they've moved on to the red, kind of, they went away beyond. Kind of 111 to 150 is a small percentage, but those were considerably more. I just wondered if it was a specific percentage.
So exclusions, it's not a percentage, it's a rate. So
I mean, I take it that, so what I mean is flag, green, it's RAG, sorry, it's green, amber, red, and it's set in green at the moment. To move it into amber, then red, I would imagine, what would the exclusion rates have to be at, and what would be the number, do you know?
I would need to get that qualified from our performance manager. Thank you on that one. In relation to your question on composite classes, so a composite class is actually smaller than what you would call perhaps a straight primary 5 class or a primary 4 class. So in our classes from primary 3 upwards, there can be 33 pupils in those classes, whereas a multi-composite class, where there are pupils of more than one stage, the maximum number in that class is 25. So that takes acknowledgement of the fact that the teacher is working with children who are working at different chronological ages as well as academic levels. But I think if you speak to any class teacher, whether they teach in a multi-composite class or an individual stage class, they'll tell you that there is a variety of needs within all of those classes. But one of the expectations of a classroom teacher is that the lessons that they deliver meet the needs of the young people, and a feature of a highly effective classroom practitioner is that the lessons are differentiated. So that means that you will not see every pupil in the class sitting down doing the same task at the one time, that the work is being taught and the tasks that the young people are being asked to complete are matched to the level of their academic potential.
And one of the other questions I asked was about, exclusions. Was it any of them about abuse of teaching staff?
We are, so schools are asked to give a reason for the exclusion when they record them, and there is a breakdown of that. We could get that breakdown of the reasons for exclusions to you if you would require that.
So get a nod for Hearts if that's okay, thank you. And I think it's now a protocol when it's shared with one elected member, it's shared with the whole committee if that's okay. Thank you. Alison, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you for your questions, Councillor Drysborough. I suppose, just as Karen said about composite classes, they are set by SNCT, and so therefore we sit within the regulations that are set out for all schools across Scotland. You then mentioned about partnerships, other than business partnerships, and I think it would be helpful to hear from both head teachers, because every school, as you know, has different partnerships. We do work locally across the authority with Let's Get Sporty, and they are one of our key partners in terms of working with young people, but in a more localised level. And Mrs. Woods already mentioned Kyantics as one of our partners, and I'm sure that Mr. Murray could share some of the partners that they're working with at a much more local level.
If you'd like me to come in now, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things you've mentioned there about community partnerships is absolutely essential. We're constantly trying to develop our partnerships, and we have our DYW coordinators who try to link, and that's primarily with businesses. However, we try to understand that it's not just about employment, it's about the skills that young people can actually develop. We've locally just worked with EnviroClean with our 5th years who are working on a Powering Futures programme, and that's looking at meta skills. So it's not your formal academic programmes, it's about the skills that young people require when they go into work, transferable skills. We did a lot of work with the EnviroClean, which is fantastic. We worked with the Annan Harbour Board, the museum, the History Town group, of Devil's Porridge. I've recently just been to the Rotary talking about how we can expand and try to get those networks out. At the moment, we have our new 6th year engaging in the Youth Philanthropy Initiative, and they are actually right now making, the way we work it is they have 1 week before they get into 6th year, and it's part of their finding out about the local community. So they look for social issues where there are local charities, and they actually reach out to the local charities and find out what they could do with £3,000. Look for a localised ring fence project and actually make connections with that. And actually one of the things that they find is that they start to volunteer, start to engage with the local charities. So it could be homeless, it could be mental health, it could be food poverty. And there's numerous projects that they're exploring at the moment. And the whole idea of that is that they have some kind of community payback. Our charities committee and the seniors will then carry that forward, and they tend to have a local and a national community, a charity that they'll approach. And it's just about building those links constantly, so they've got that understanding, they've got the network of what's going on within the local commitment, within the local community, and it's just to try and help them build up their skills that allow them to be, I suppose, more employable, more a unique selling point when they apply to universities and colleges, and just an all-round better citizen with an understanding of what's on in their town. One of the things on a curricular level we're looking to do next year is formalise an IDL, an interdisciplinary learning project, which is very much based upon Annan. And they're going to be doing all different subjects within first and second year. We're going to be looking at all different aspects of Annan, from the geography, the business, from science, etc. And they're going to be really taking the education and learning outside and actually exploring what's on their doorstep with the curricular provision. And we're always looking and we're always welcoming new partnerships and connections with local community groups where we can.
Ms. Tara, got to come in? Yep.
Okay, so we also do the YPI, and I would agree with everything that you say, really positive feedback from children and young people and local businesses, so that's something which has been ongoing. We've got a number of different partners that we work with. An important partner for us is Moffat Town Hall, where we've got a number of young people that go and do work experience with them as part of a planned program. But we also have the Friday Club, where it is an elderly group of residents in Moffat, where our children go along and befriend them and perform different types of music, arts and drama. For example, our Moffat Pipe Band has been there. So that's a really valuable opportunity. We do work with Moffat Men's Shed. We do work alongside Moffat Civic Pride, who work on the local environment to keep it looking smart and tidy. One of our key partners is Moffat and District Community Council, who are hugely supportive of our work and take an active role in school. And they've actually just implemented a community engagement award for this year, recognising the work of a young person who has engaged and improved their local community. We are in planning with Moffat Promotions, who are the people that do the Christmas festival, etc. It's the Colvin Rams 100-year anniversary coming up this year in November. So we've got an interdisciplinary learning project with a local artist, where they're making a 7-foot life-sized ram articulated puppet, which is going to be part of a parade that children are involved in. We've got more formalised curriculum links through the Army Cadets linked detachment that we've had for a number of years, and also Duke of Edinburgh. With our DYW coordinator, we've implemented the Gen Plus programme, which is working with local businesses and partners for S1 to S3. And last but not least, our parents and families often come in and either volunteer to support learning or talk about the jobs that they do or local community links that they have with a view to getting children and young people involved in that.
First class, Archie. You okay with that? No, really good. Thanks very much for that. That was excellent. Councillor Thompson. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for everything that's been contributed so far. And Tara, apologies for missing your contribution at Moffat Community Council last night. I'd left before you'd come in because it was quite a long meeting. But I mean, it's evident that certainly in Moffat community, the links between the school, the community, and the local enterprises is evidenced. I suppose when it comes to this report, though, what we're looking at is what impact all these sort of things have in terms of the performance measures that were being tested against, if you like. And I think, you know, there were some of the initiatives that have been spoken about today, which it might demonstrate that, yes, that's actually led to better outcomes for the young people involved. Certainly that's the intent always, but there might be times when, we've tried things and they haven't quite worked. So it's about how do we learn from that and change to new systems. And I think that's partly what the standardised curriculum might bring about, because clearly while schools are always on an improvement journey, the last few years have seen that downward trend. And I do notice, though, welcomingly, that the literacy and numeracy is up and above, I think, and well, certainly in some of the cases above the target value. So that's a relatively good trend. However, even some of the positives around, say, attendance rate for looked after children, it might be up, but it's still below target. So it's trying to get a sense of what are we doing right, and is that localised, because we're getting the sort of aggregated figure, and I'm sure there's very different stories because of the different sizes and backgrounds of schools in Moffat and Annan, for example. So I'm just wondering if we could drill into a bit more about that, because clearly some of the things we've been doing, the long trend is down and the status is red. And I think, just on Archie's point, I think it's maybe there's a 5% tolerance. I'm sure I heard this at a recent seminar. So when you get these figures, if it's within 5%, it might not trigger an amber. But because a lot of the figures are like not quite on target, but they're still kind of a couple of percentage off, so we still get a green tick. But yeah, just how do we drill down to each local school's performance in meeting these targets? And similarly, the key performance indicators, data not yet available for this year. Is there a timing issue when we get this report? And are we always doomed to get data not yet available just because of the time that these statistics are measured and presented? Thank you.
Since nobody else has lifted their head, I'll answer the question. So thank you for your questions, Councillor Thompson. I'll start with your last question, because that's the easiest one to answer, I suppose. No, you're not doomed in terms of the timing of reports. We will be guided in terms of how we get the right data to you at the right time, whether it's through a report or whether it's through elected member seminars. And that's the work we've been tasked with, and that's exactly what we're looking to do going forward. So hopefully you will have more information. And as I spoke to Councillor Jameson earlier, it's about that granular detail. So that is work in progress. You also spoke about the different sort of like the variability from our different schools and the sort of what are we doing? We know we are doing that improvement work, but how do we do that at a local level? I think it's to give that assurance that the head teachers are in place to lead their schools and to deliver on that improvement journey, and they do that day by day, but they also do that on an annual basis through their school improvement planning, as well as their standards and quality. So therefore they're reflecting on what the practice has been, what has worked, what has not worked, and then what they're perhaps going to do differently, or what they're going to keep doing to ensure that they're then having the success in their schools. And then at that next level, of course, we have our quality improvement framework, and that really looks at how are we coming collaboratively, collectively with our head teachers, with our schools, to ensure that everyone is on that forward journey with us. So we have, as you and our Mr Murray has already shared, we have one-to-one meetings with the Chief Education Officer. That's with every secondary head teacher. Now, that last year they were around data. He's currently meeting with primary head teachers to look at their data too. So that's a new initiative that we've brought into the system. We also have education services meetings, whereas before we would have had learning and teaching meetings and resource meetings. We've pulled resource together, so we have 8 education services meetings across the academic year now. That's where every head teacher is expected to attend, where we bring in speakers from out with. So if it's Stephen Mumby speaking about leadership and imperfect leadership, that you don't need to be perfect to be the right leader in charge. We've also had colleagues from HMIE, so we've had Gooch Dillon come in to speak about the inspection and what we should be doing within our schools to improve outcomes for young people and not just for when the inspectors come in. So there's been those conversations have started to happen this year as well, and we've got a plan for next year in terms of looking at learning and teaching across all of our schools. So there's a standardisation of what we're saying is good practice nationally, but then bringing that back to a local level. And then there's a collaboration in terms of working with our head teachers to say, how do we then enact that in our schools? And again, we're looking at collaborative reviews. How do we use the skills and knowledge of our head teachers to start to challenge one another? I think one of the statements made at an education services meeting from one of our head teachers was, if we're having peer observations, if we're having our colleagues coming in, let's not tickle each other under the chin. Let's be really critical friends and making sure that we're actually challenging and supporting the work across. So therefore, if something good is happening in Moffat Academy, how are we then using that to then go to another school to say, well, actually, have you thought about this? Because you might be doing that well, but you need to start considering that, and not having that sort of gentle conversation, but a much more challenging, supportive conversation that ensures that we're all moving forward with improvement.
And just to add on to that, as part of Framework for Improvement, the data strategy that's in place, so the attainment data from our schools is shared with all other schools. So where there is strong practice and success in a particular area, in a particular schools, head teachers again are seeing that in live time and are able to reach out to one another to say, oh, this is happening really strongly in your setting. Can you perhaps share your journey with us, so that similar things can be built upon in their own schools?
And that data does go down to a subject-by-subject basis. So therefore, both secondary head teachers, very quickly after the results are in, they have not just their data for subject-by-subject, they also have each other's data, so they can actually say, well, if, for example, business studies in Moffat Academy is really strong, but it's not as strong, and perhaps at Annan Academy, there's conversations, that collaboration can happen at that local level, and that can happen across the authority.
So, Stephen, it's up to you if you want to come back in or not.
No, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the responses. I think what I was trying to get at was so the data that's not yet available, obviously we can't really make any meaningful comparison today in terms of performance between 2023-24, 24-25, particularly around positive destinations and gaining the 5 or more awards. But I mean, what I'm hearing from earlier is that one, well, we should be getting that in future, I think, if I've heard you right, and two, I mean, that it's been on a downward trend previously, and we're still below the sort of target, as it were. So, are you sort of saying today that with the new, more equitable arrangement in terms of the number of subjects being offered, in terms of that standardisation, that number will go up? Because clearly in the past, schools have taken those decisions to say, well, we might offer this because we think that'll be the best outcome, and then it's maybe not worked. And I think the other thing I'm hearing from you is that we're not going to get at this committee the individual performance of schools in terms of those individual targets. This is an aggregated one. Is that what you're saying? Just in terms of knowing which school's doing well according to whatever metrics, because I'm sure it'll be varied for many different aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So again, I'll start with the last question and work my way backwards. So you're right, you'll get the Annandale and Eskdale performance data at this level, but I would absolutely encourage you that you can work with the schools if you want to have those conversations, that head teachers can have that conversation with you about where their schools sit, and I'm sure they would welcome you into any of their schools. In terms of the improvement journey, the framework for improvement is that's what we've set out as a vision, that there is to be improvement across all of our schools. We know that when we look at our family group, we sit in the third family group in terms of poverty, and so therefore, and we know if we look at our LGBF benchmarking, we are below where we should be. So therefore, the framework for improvement is the framework to ensure that we are making progress, to ensure that we are improving all of the outcomes across all of our schools. So will you see an improvement in our data? That is the aspiration and the expectation of the delivery of the framework for improvement across Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay with that, Stephen?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll say this probably to all members. So we've been a very healthy debate, discussion. We're getting a lot of really good answers and clarity in regards to information that we're requesting. But 2.3, the recommendations, is fundamentally where we make our decision. We've covered 2.1 and 2.2 as we've been recommended. So if anybody's got any particular points they want to raise, that'll be reflected in the minute. We can see that coming back, and we can follow that through, or we can take up direct conversations with head teachers, so on and so forth, as what's been outlined already. But George, you want to come back in?
Yes, just on 2.3, I would really like to have a closer look at Dumfries and Galloway. Sorry, at the comparison between Annandale Eskdale and Dumfries and Galloway to find if there is anything specific that we as council members can do to help you maybe improve the outcomes of these schools. Now, there may be reasons for that we can't do anything about, but I would really like to have a closer look. Would you have a closer look? Is there anything, talking to the head teachers, is there anything that's happening in Annandale and Eskdale or isn't happening, or there's reasons for the apparent lower level achievement? And you mentioned the family group as well, and you're right. That was the most sort of poignant thing for me when I looked at the local government benchmarking, that with the 8 comparators, we were 7th and 8th in quite a lot of these things. So, and within that as well, the cost per pupil of our family members, they were spending more on their children than we were, and that's very simplistic. So I would just like to, for the benefit of the committee, just to be assured that Annandale and Eskdale has had a look at why we are where we are, and is that reasonable, or can we do better, that sort of thing. But my final point, and I will be quiet, assessment's difficult because it's such a complex area, but one of the things that you've identified yourselves and we've identified as members is the positive destination. We know we've got 95% of the children that reach positive destinations, but again, from an area perspective, what are those positive destinations? And one of our objectives within education and the council is that young people achieve what they want to achieve. And are we doing that? Are we getting positive destinations where it's maybe not sustainable, or it's a dead-end job? How many of our children are going to good universities? How many of our children are going to modern apprenticeships that end up with them in employment? So, and I know that Jim Brown, the assistant director, has identified that they will be looking at that. So, but I think for Annandale and Eskdale, it's really important. A lot of our industries have declined. We have difficulty travelling to the Central Belt to go to university and things like that. When I speak to small traders, small tradesmen, sometimes reluctant to take on modern apprenticeships because anecdotally they're saying that these kids come forward and they haven't got a clue, which is unfair, but that happens. So it's just finding, I think one thing we could really concentrate on that's kind of definitive, the children and young people come out of our schools in a positive destination with a sort of balanced outlook on life, the ability to be employed, that sort of thing, specific to Annandale and Eskdale, given the employment challenges that we have here. My main point is 2.3. Can we have an Annandale and Eskdale, if you like, deep dive? What can we do better?
I mean, a broader suggestion I would come up with as well, because of what's been said and what's been offered too, is that maybe it would be good if, I'm thinking you and for Annandale South would get in contact with the 4 elected members, have that level of conversation, but then it could go from there, but it might be at that, maybe on top of what you're just about to suggest, Alison, I can. So.
Again, that look across, that read across, we have the standards and quality reports for every school. We have the school improvement plans for every school. So when in the summer during recess, where our team, Karen and I's team, the quality improvement officers, we sit and do that read across, so we can pick up where there are trends, where there are areas that have perhaps worked in certain schools, so therefore we can then share that practice. And that goes back to those education services meetings. When we're picking up the trends, we're picking up good practice, we can say, this has worked, here's the reasons why it's worked, so then we get the head teachers to stand up and say, I did this, it worked. But equally, during collaboration and conversation, it's about saying, there's schools that have tried this and this, it hasn't worked, so why is it not worked? So we have that sort of read across for all standards and quality reports, which are statutory documents, as well as the school improvement plans, to see that we can actually marry up how we then move forward. In terms of your positive destinations, I know that you're very keen to understand more about the positive destinations. We have positive destinations 95 to 97% across Dumfries and Galloway. Our unknowns are where we really focus a lot of attention, because the unknowns are the ones that are at highest risk. We have DYW coordinators within every school who are working with our colleagues in SDS. We also have employability coordination group leads, which are usually deputies within schools, and they're having the conversations from S3 onwards about anticipated leaver destinations, where young people are asked to start to consider what occupation they want to do. So I acknowledge that we have local employability, we have local employers, but it's about how do we marry the local employers and what their needs are, and what the anticipated leaver destination of a young person is and their aspiration. You spoke about aspiration earlier, so it's about trying to marry those up. But we do have a strong number of young people who still go into higher education as well as further education. But we also have I think it's about a third of our young people go into employment. So again, the skills that they are learning through their BGE, through the meta skills, is about ensuring that they are ready to then go into the workforce. We also have partnership with employability and skills, so if you think of our wider directorate, and that's making sure that if young people are not ready, is how do they have a request for assistance, and how do we work with partners within the local council, as well as other partners such as Let's Get Sporty, to ensure young people are ready to go into a positive destination. And then for young people who have got an additional support need, we have specific key workers who give them that additionality of support 6 months before they go into their destination, and then 6 months post that destination. So there's a lot of things that we're going on to look at how we ensure that young people, A, are telling us what they want to do when they leave, as well as then trying to give them the opportunities through work experience, through partnership working, to then have the understanding of what that job may look like. And then we have work with DYW, ECG, SDS and employability and skills to then ensure that they have not just a positive destination, it's then sustained.
I understand all that, and our job is to challenge, so I'm going to challenge. You mentioned 95, 96% positive destinations. In the local authority benchmarking, we're 7th or 8th on positive destinations. Now that confused me as well, but we're 7th or 8th on positive destinations. So I know all the work that's been going on, but what I would like to see is what are the quality of these positive destinations? Our young people, as in our objectives in the council, is to ensure that young people achieve what they want to achieve. I would say it would be stronger than that, achieve what they can achieve. Now, all children are not achieving what they can achieve. The positive destinations could just be they've got a job and a takeaway. You say about achieving academic, going to universities, well, the stats are not strong in this area because of our higher results. So there's a lot of children don't go to university, or they go to a local university, which is not bad, but how many of our children go to St Andrews or Edinburgh and Glasgow? And that's at one end. And how many people get modern apprenticeships actually take them through? So I know what you're doing, I know what SDS are doing, etc., etc. But what we need as members is to be confident that we're looking at that 95% thing, that's great. But let's look deeper. What are these positive destinations? Are young people achieving what they want to achieve? And go back to 2.3, Chair. The internal discussions you have is not reaching us. You know, the council members need to know why is Annandale and Eskdale, for example, not achieving the same as the rest of Dumfries and Galloway. And as I said before, there may be legitimate reasons. But when we get the stats out and we see that Annandale and Eskdale are 10% below everybody else, we need to know why as members, because we're challenging you to deliver for the children and the staff in Dumfries and Galloway. So I would really ask that we look at something for members. It may be your suggestion that we have it 2 members, but the public need to know as well, because if we've got to delve through all the reports that you do, and they're very good, what I would like, and I would suggest we have something delivered that is really instructive to us, that we don't need to look at 10 different reports and etc., etc. So I don't want hard work, but I would like us to know why we are underperforming per se.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. My understanding is that with the new format for area committees going forward is that you will have the opportunity to scrutinise the service plan, all the service plans, and from the service plans pick 2, 3, 4 areas that you want a specific sort of deep dive local context on. So my understanding is that as of September that's going to be the case going forward. So the service plan that were presented in April, will be then shared with you all to select the areas that you want to focus on.
That's fine, Chair.
Oh, lovely, and thanks for that. Just because Stuart was whispering at me here too, so you do it in September, I think you're saying it'll come back to Stuart. Aye, so we're getting the reassurance that September, September you get a chance there. So Councillor Driver, and then we'll go to the recommendations after that. Thanks, Archie.
Thanks, Chair. And it's to come back to 2.3, and I'm just wondering if this is a potential to come back to area committee, and it comes back to that You know, a community raises a child, not just a school, and obviously we have to make mistakes to improve learning as well. You know, you're never going to get everything right in one go. So taking those, you know, opportunities for unintended consequences of a project that you're taking forward, is there an opportunity to come forward with a positive unintended consequence and a negative unintended consequence, just as a sort of case study type thing?
So I think that goes back to in September as part of the deep dive, that if you're asking for, okay, tell us something that worked well, and tell us something that you didn't think would work, perhaps has still worked well, or tell us something that you tried and it didn't work, and tell us what you're now doing next. I think that goes back to how we report back to area committees.
Right, first class, thanks so much. Really enjoyed all your inputs there. It's been really good, as it always is at area committee. I'm going to leave an open question, but that's all right, and it goes back to page 25. So, and it's that line of trajectory. So it's been touched on about the exclusion rates. What does that look like in 2 or 3 years' time? How do we see that gap closing, bringing it back into line? So I'll leave that open. We'll pick up on it at a different point in time, if that's possible. So members, 2.1, 2.2 we've done. Luke, just to be sure, are you okay? You want to come in for anything? No, you're fine. Luke's absolutely fine. So 2.3, any particular points at this moment in time take into consideration? I think there's a small ask that maybe the head teachers could get in touch. We'll maybe extend that to Moffat and Lockerbie and Langham too, just to in touch with the members. And if there's any in particular, I think what George is picking up on, if they want to do a deeper dive locally, understand and get that before it comes back to committee, they can have that conversation at a local level, which they probably do anyways, but it gives them that opportunity. If there's an ask there, but specifically on performance-related matters under 2.3, is there anything anybody wants to put in specifically at this moment in time? Take that as we know, we've got some actions here. Brilliant, thanks so much everyone, really appreciate your time coming out. Oh sorry, Councillor Thompson, just a bit too quick there, sorry. Stephen?
Yeah, no, it was just, and it's just to get that nailed down, reassurance. So, because I don't think members, certainly I don't like getting a retrospective report where basically the data is not yet available. So if we're being told today that no, in future all reports will have the full data that we're expecting, rather than the gaps in the report that mean we can't really do that comparison. So I think that would be my request. If it's already in train, that's grand, and it's just to get that assurance. Thank you.
So I'll just bring Alison in and ensure if need be, but I don't think that was the case. But Alison?
No, I think what I've said is that we'll get clarity around when we can, what data you want and how we give that to you. So there'll still be a time lag, because in terms of when our data is put into our service plan, when it is then reported, and time it's then ratified, there is a time lag, and because it has to go to full committee first before it then comes to area committees. So that's why there's conversation around how do we get it in a platform, in a place where you will see it in a more timely way. But I don't, my understanding is that for that to be in a more timely way, it'll not be then presented at area committees. You may well get it after SQA. So for example, when the results come out on the 6th of August, you may well then get something that's much more timely at that time, but it'll not then be presented in this format.
Stephen, I suppose I got the reassurance around the fact that we can actually meet with head teachers, pick up on that in a private setting, have those conversations, and beyond that, obviously we're on the service committees and whatever area committee, so on and so forth, and going back to a deep dive. So through them private conversations, we could actually specifically ask in regards to the deep dive what information we want to see, depending on what subject matter we want to touch on. That's where I got the reassurance, Stephen, so I'm not just sure about yourself. Are you okay with that answer?
I mean, broadly, this isn't specifically to do with the individual schools, although that is something that we'd like to follow up with individual head teachers at the right time. But this is actually when we're getting presented with a report, which is about benchmarking indicators and comparisons between 2 years, and one of the columns is basically empty because it's not available. If it's a timing issue about when data is validated or ratified, that understand why that's been the story up to now. But I think we can, going forward, make sure that any report coming to any committee has the complete comparative information. Otherwise, delay the committee or provide it in a different place. Do you know what I mean? It just makes no sense to continue to do that when you can't really make a comparison at all between 24-25 and 24-23. So I think that's so hopefully we've got the minds and the skills within the council to figure out something, just even if it's just a phasing or timing issue about reporting or where it gets reported. But I think that's what I started to hear from the response before. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Timing is what people are saying in the background, so we'll make sure that's scheduled into the area committee reporting mechanism at the right times. So please feel free to come back on that. But as far as 2.1, 2.2s, we've done that, and 2.3, we've nothing formal to go up at this moment in time, but we have got actions behind that. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks very much for the thumbs up. Thanks again very much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you. Members, we'll move on to item number 5. Give me a wee second just to... Members, item number 5, Annandale Eskdale Area Committee discretionary budgets for 25-26. The next report is this report is asking for us to note the funding available and to agree the key priorities process and allocations for 25-26. So I'll first ask members to note the total budget allocated for the area committee this year is £312,000. Annandale Eskdale's share of that is 87,269. That is £1,000. So members, I think we're happy. But Jamie, I think you've maybe got something to add before we start. So Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would just like to highlight there is a typo on Appendix 2, Column 4. That should actually read Proposed Allocation 25-26. And also like to highlight, since the writing of this report and the publishing of the report, over the last few weeks, the Ward Officer of the Annandale East and Eskdale has been in discussion with representatives of the Langham, Hughes and Westerkirk Community Council, who in the last number of years have delivered the civic receptions traditionally associated with the Langham Common Riding. It's become apparent that the budget allocated is a historic budget of £527, and this has never been increased for the purpose of the civic receptions, and it is insufficient to date. Approximately 40 people on average attend the annual breakfast, which includes a series of speeches, toasts on the Langham Common Riding Day, a tradition that dates back to the days of the Langham Town Council. The evening reception is within the Town Hall chambers and is a drinks reception followed by presentations to various dignitaries. To continue to fulfil both of the civic receptions and uphold the tradition, I would propose an increase of the allocation of £300 from 572 to 872. Therefore, the allocation of this would be supported from the support costs of the galas and common ridings budget, which I believe is achievable. If members are agreed, the Ward Officer would engage with the Community Council and the Langham Alliance and allow collectively to deliver both of those civic receptions. Thank you.
First class. Before I bring in Councillor Mail, and I'll bring you in too, Archie, is that, so I'm looking at page 34, Appendix 2, to support Langham Common Riding civic receptions, and you're saying lift that figure from 572 to 872. I just wondered, my initial thoughts were that I'm absolutely fine with that. Should it just be rounding off a 900 to make it simple? But Dennis, you want to come in first. Councillor Mail, then Driver.
Yeah, just thanks, Chair. I think the fact that this has been recognised is excellent because, I mean, this figure is historical, I think, many years, and costs do go up. And things like the breakfast, you're never quite sure there's going to be 35 there or 45 there, to be quite honest. And what happens in the evening, it's usually the Cornet's family and friends, etc., that come to the evening reception. And now what was instituted was that the Cornet's mother, because she does all the work, gets a nice glass presentation, and it depends if there's a semi-jubilee, jubilee, and whatever cornet, they also get one as well. So this then should well and truly cover that. So I'm delighted, and I just hope members can support it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Dennis. Councillor Driver, Archie?
Yeah, I would agree with Dennis, Chair, on everything that he actually says. This is Langham's day, at the end of the day. You know, the common riding is it brings thousands of people into Langham, and it's a great earner for the economy, for tourism, for, you know, hotels and other places as well. So really happy that this has went up, because we do need to see that input from the area committee to make sure that that is as positive as possible.
So just say they're rounding up to 900, is that a silly suggestion from myself? Do you think just that it's an extra 28 quid? But to me, it may be even up to, it might come bang on 872. It just seems an exact figure. There's no contingency there as well. Would that be something that you would want to support or not? Is it, Jamie, appropriate?
It's coming from this budget here, so that's why we stick with 300.
Okay then, aye. So, Jamie?
Yeah, as you can see, as suggested, I would be taking that from the roads and services, from the community assets for the support to the galas and common riding, so that would reduce that budget even more further.
Okay, I'll leave it as it is then. Forget that suggestion. But if members are happy with that, obviously we'll have to get to the recommendations. That would just the offset. So Jamie's outlined that particular point. So going back to members' recommendations, I've already touched on actually. So just to note, 2.1 to note, the 312k, the budget across the Fleece and Galloway, that is the Annandale Eskdale allocation at 2.2, which is £87,269.81 to be exact, outlined in paragraphs 4.1, 4.2. Now, so 2.3 is to agree and allocate the key projects and initiatives detailed in Appendix 2 with amendment. Members okay with that? Yep, as agreed, and we'll see that coming through. 2.4 is to agree, and I don't see any other hands up, so we'll just keep moving on. Agree to delegate authority to Annandale's Ward Officer Annandale South, being Jamie herself, and authorise payments in relation to ward member individual awards as set on paragraph 4.5. Yep, we've seen that as a go. And 2.5 is to agree the guidance as per Appendix 3 for the Annandale and Eskdale sports grants. Excellent, first class. Thanks, members. Item number 6. I'll get the papers together. Thanks, members. So, the next report is our Tackling Poverty and Inequalities budget for 25-26. The next financial year. We'll be aware through monitoring reports of the significant impact of these budget allocations to our communities. Members will note at paragraph 4.2 of the report that its meeting on the 1st of May 25, the Tackling Poverty, Inequalities and Housing Subcommittee considered the formula used to determine the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities budget. This resulted in Annandale and Eskdale receiving an increase of 4.5% or £8,100 in real terms on last year's allocation. That's good news. We are now asked to note the funding available and to agree the key priorities and process for applications for 25-26 this year going forward. And again, Jamie Nicholson's here. Do you want to add anything, Jamie, to the report? Or?
Nothing further to add to the report. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jamie. So I'll open it up to members. Then it's got anything to say. If not, let's go through the recommendations. That's Driver, then Jimison.
I was just going to say that I agree with the recommendations.
Councillor Jimison, just in case.
Yeah, I agree with the recommendation as well. It's just a couple of queries and thanks. The mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, alcohol abuse has been added, so I think that's really helpful. Would it be possible to actually make sure that folk in that area of expertise actually know that this is a criteria now, so that people have the option to take it up? I know that might not be easy, Jamie, but if any relevant folk that you know, you could say that that is one of the criteria now, and that might trigger some interest in applying for anything that would fit the criteria. The second on page 43 is point 2. Projects make a difference but should not aim to mitigate the level of poverty but provide a notable step change, which I totally agree with. I think that's a really good addition. How would you manage that? How would you follow that criteria to make sure that it's not just mitigation, that it's actually something that's going to make a difference? That's a pretty subjective question, but it's quite important, because a lot of the stuff we do is mitigate. We just accept the problems are there and we try and help folk to stay in the same place. But if we actually have projects that actually have a progressive, offer a progression from poverty to something that takes them out of poverty for the longer term, it must be quite difficult that for you to judge, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Obviously, on your first point, we'll make sure that we try to make contact with key partners to try and circulate that fund that is available and highlight those changes that have been made in addition to the priorities. So I'll seek further guidance from colleagues and further afield as well to try and make sure that's widespread throughout the community. Okay. With regards to your criteria section 2, obviously this can be something that we can implement into the phase when we're benchmarking or marking or looking over the applications. What tends to happen is that there is, when all of the applications are received, there is a formal scoring panel that is formed from various officers throughout and external partners and key stakeholders as well. We could ask that this is highlighted when they're actually marking those to make sure that there is key changes. Obviously, this is very dependent on the applications that we receive and hard to sort of quantify at this sort of time, but we can certainly make sure that that is a key feature on the scoring panel when they're looking at those applications.
Thank you. That's really reassuring. Thanks, Chair.
Well, thank you. And hopefully this will be some kind of outcome report in regards to how its performance, and you'll get a chance to ask that particular question in regards to change. Councillor Driver, Archie?
Yeah, just to come back on the first question George asked you about the advertising of this. We normally put something out in the local papers and all that as well, don't we?
Yes, what we do is after the minutes are agreed, it obviously goes, well, in part goes onto the council web page for the grants and the funding that's available in there. I also circulate that within all of the sort of local networking groups, so that goes far and wide with regards to community council, social media pages, any community groups, social media pages, and we ask those to be circulated along, as well as key partners across the council and other various agencies within the community.
First class, don't say anything online, Stuart. Just that outturn report coming back potentially, because that's in the schedule, and that's why I'm kind of putting it to you. I take it we will see that at some point, end of year type of thing.
Yes, so the monitoring report will be in a year's time in advance of you setting the budget, but the monitoring is March next year that you'll receive on the outturn.
First class, thank you. Members, we've been asked to note 2.1, which is the allocation of £42,426, as per outlined in paragraph 4.2. Agree to the thank you. Agree to the priorities, eligibility and criteria for Annandale Eskdale Area Committee tackling poverty and inequalities grants 25-26 as outlined within the appendix. Agree, thank you, thanks very much. And to agree to open up for applications Annandale Eskdale Area Committee tackling poverty and inequalities grant 25-26 in the timetable outlined in paragraph 4.5. Thank you, members. Excellent, first class. Item number 7. That's you, if that's okay. Thanks very much. So, development of the regional parking strategy. So, this is I'll give Tony a note if she's come up or not. But Tony certainly. So, Mr. Toppin here. Our next report asks members to consider the development of the regional parking strategy delivery plan for Annandale and Eskdale, and provides an update on the progress being made in relation to the decriminalisation of parking enforcement. There is a significant amount of detail within the report, good reading that, particularly within the appendix where a series of bespoke actions or recommendations for implementation in Annandale and Eskdale are outlined. Tony Toppin says Ailsa Hammond is here too, is that right? Yeah. Not yet, but anyway, so ultimately Tony's here in particular, and Tony, if there's anybody else needs to answer questions, you can point us in that direction. Anything, Tony, you think you need to add to the report before we go into questions? Also, I'm getting a wag of the head for those online, so Tony's not thinking. Members, I'll open up to questions in regards to this. Look, first class, go on in, first man.
Thank you, Chair. It's on page 64, I have a question under 5.2 on parking quality. The report goes on to state the improvements need to be made to car parks, and it's like repainting, like faded markings and signage. I'm just wondering how exactly it will be funded, especially as I think we all know the road service is under incredible pressure, not just to get it up to the required standard, but also continued maintenance to ensure that it can't be disputed if enforcement action is to take place. So yeah, I'm just wondering how that will be funded in the future.
Through you, Chair, thanks for your question. Yes, as part of the regional parking strategy development, we did look at the whole financing of the different processes and things would need to be in place to roll out enforcement, and obviously improving our infrastructure, i.e. the lines on the ground, any signage, etc. was part of it. So it was part of our sort of financial assessment that in year 0 of the rollout, there would be initial outlay. So, for instance, we'd be employing new parking officers, they would need new uniforms, we need the infrastructure in place. Then moving forward into year 1, once we have the officers on the ground actually issuing fines for parking, so that'll be for the various offences, parking on double yellows, footway parking, fines regarding our council's car parks. So we'll start to create revenue from the fines, and that will be offset against the initial outlay from year 1. So then moving forward, once we have a regular income stream from the fines, that money will go towards paying for our parking officers, the upkeep of our car parks, filling in the potholes, relining, improving the lighting so people feel secure when they're parking their cars. So going forward, that money will be from the fines will be ring-fenced for that, and any surplus would be used for sustainable transport as well. If there is any surplus for improvement to buses, for cycling, active travel routes, that sort of thing. So it's all been put into the bigger picture of how we are going to finance the way we are going to control parking in the future. Thanks.
Okay with that answer, Luke? Yeah, Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thanks Tony, for doing that report. A lot of hard work going into it. It's just on specifically that question you answered there about the potential for income. We've not been the best at actually trying to get an income budget forecast, not particularly in roads, but other places as well. So how confident are you in that budget will be produced to support what Luke was saying there?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Drysborough. That's a good question, and it was part of the whole assessment. You see the report was done by Sistra. Sistra are the consultants that we employed to do this parking commission. Now, they've got experience of doing parking commissions, reports, enforcement with other Scottish local authorities. They've been through this. They've got a model that they use based on the nature, layout, geometry of Dumfries and Galloway, the various towns. They could sort of accurately estimate potential revenue from fines, and if this was then based on how many parking officers we would employ. So, obviously, the more officers we have, the greater area we could cover, but again, we don't want to be out there with parking officers in every town and village. There's got to be a balance. So the way we forecasted it was based on 6 officers across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway, out and about various locations. Some would be permanent in the larger towns, for instance Dumfries, perhaps Annan, Stranraer, and others would have a bit of a roaming remit, if you know what I mean, to go to different places on different days of the week. So that was very much based on decriminalised parking enforcement, which is the double yellow lines, parking in disabled bays, and that was very much the model. Since the latest ban has come into place on pavement parking and double parking and parking across drop curbs, that's another area that we can now use. So if the officers are out and about and they see somebody parked on a footway and they're actually blocking the footway for people that need to get past, they can be issued with a spot fine there and then. So actually our estimate might be on the low side in terms of revenue, because now that with the pavement parking ban, there's opportunities to actually increase that. So I think once we get it in place and we get the officers in place, we'll see how the first year goes. Do we need more officers? Do we look at different methods, different models? Do we employ some officers for seasonal areas like Kirkcudbright or Moffat, where we know there's more visitors and we need more presence to enforce it? So yeah, it has been considered, Councillor, and I think we'll have a sort of flexible approach going forward.
Councillor, you okay with that? Yep. Right. Councillor Jimson, George.
We had a brief discussion earlier, Tony, but for the benefit of everybody else, could you explain how for example, escalating actions could be taken. I'm thinking in specifically, Anna's got a very busy car park and tends to be full of largely people who work or people who are shopping in Annan. But just a general question, if there's large vehicles inappropriately parked, inconsiderately parked, what is the escalation process of that? What powers do our staff have, and if it's escalated to the police, etc.?
Yep, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So I'll just refer you to our our new parking places order for 2025. It's just about ready to be published. Now, this will replace the old historic order that you'll see there's still signs up in some of our council car parks. It was an old order from 1984, a regional council order. So this new order very much will replace that, and we've got about 100 council car parks that's going to come under this car park. And it's very clear in the order. I'm just looking at it here for Annan. The two council car parks are at Murray Street and Butt Street, and they are for passenger vehicle and light good vehicles only. And there'll be like no overnight sleeping in them, you know, no cooking, no barbecues, no tents put up. There's a whole list of restrictions, and that's to make it a safe place for people that do want to, that work in the town, shop in the town. It's a safe place for them to park. Now, if there's a larger vehicle, by the definition of light good vehicle, I think it's under the tonnage. So I would need to check, but larger vehicles that come in, large motorhomes, initially they can then get fined under this, and after they've been fined, the council will have powers for removal. And then if there are other offences that are actually maybe breaching other traffic laws, then there is scope then actually to call the police if there's a need to. But initially, the vehicle, if somebody was caught parking there, and it's quite clear because these car parks will have new signs put up, and it'll be very clear that who is allowed to park in these car parks and who's not. So some car parks will allow larger vehicles. There's some car parks, like for instance in Stranraer and Fries, where HGVs can park, but it will be signed, and if you do contravene the actual restriction, then you will receive a fine.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful.
Is there any conflict? I suppose we're being parochial here to a degree, but it's an interesting point. But the Gypsy Traveller community have quite a lot of protected characteristics. Will it affect them or not?
Potentially, I think, Chair, that as long as they comply with the order, that's fine. If there is any instances where we are unsure, then we do have we have officers within the council that deal with the travelling community that can be called upon to advise, and if necessary, to actually go and meet them and just to make them aware of the restrictions of these car parks. You know, there are facilities in Dumfries and Galloway, you know, like at Cullen and other areas for the travelling community. So if they do want to park in our, you know, the general public car parks, they have to obey the rules like the rest of us.
Okay, that's the last bit in particular was the message I was kind of looking for. So we have Councillor Dennis Mail, then Stephen Thompson. Dennis.
Thanks, Chair. Page 59 and 1, 2, 3, first question is on the fourth paragraph down, where we have parking zones on streets and that people have the right to park their car if they live there. One of the things that started to happen is somebody has the right to do that, but then they also have a blue badge in the family. So what is then happening is the car's being parked in the space it's got the ticket for, and the blue badge holders then blocking up any disabled spaces. I mean, is there anything can be done about that? Because I think the law in Scotland doesn't say that blue badge holders can only park for 3 hours. I think they're allowed to park all the time. So we're actually finding at least 2, maybe 3 of the disabled spaces are now being blocked by people that just park there all the time. And so it causes a massive problem, say, in the town centre when people that are disabled can't get to the chemist and things like that. So, I mean, is there anything to be done about that?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mail. So was that in regarding of people parking in disabled bays that don't have...
No, they have blue badges, but they also have a permit the family also have a permit to park in one of the specialised bays on, say, David Street or Parliament Square.
Yes.
So they actually taking 2 spaces. They're taking the blue badge space and they're taking the other space as well.
Taking the residents.
2 cars in the family.
That's certainly something we can look at. And again, does it come down to enforcement? And it sounds like they're maybe not breaking any rules,
No,
but that's something we can definitely look at as part of this delivery plan. And going forward, we are reviewing all like waiting restriction orders, disabled parking, etc., as part of this rollout. So when we do get DPE in place next year, we'll have all the appropriate orders in place. So yeah, that's a good point, and we'll take that forward to investigate further.
Chair, one of the other ones is 2.2.1, where you mention Charles Street, Langham. Should Kiln Green and Parliament Square now also be part of that? Because Parliament Square is also, I would say, an off-street park where the residents have a ticket, but it's not mentioned. And Kilgreen, I mean, I think Kilgreen will have to come into sway as things move on. Because the other one is further down, we're mentioning development, and you've got Langham for Murtham Farm, which technically is dead at the moment, but what is coming in place of that is the holiday park at Irvine House that will have 150 chalets on it, and that's just 3 miles south of Langham. So I mean, there will be extra car parking needed for that. And then we have Centre Parks going between Hawick and Selkirk is going to create another massive problem, because we see Langham as a proper stopping off place for those that come up the M6 looking for a coffee and a tea maybe. So I think there's issues there that could do with just being recognised and added to this to make sure that we're going to cover them, especially the holiday ones, because we see that as being really quite substantial.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mail. Yeah, I think with regards to some of these private developments, they obviously have to provide their on-site parking themselves, because these aren't. Yes, when they're visiting. Yes, yeah, I fully understand, and I think Kiln Green Car Park, it is a large car park, and yes, it does get more visitors, and it gets full during probably the summer months. So. As part of the studies previously, we did look at the capacity of some of these car parks and how full they get at certain times of the year, and that's something we can certainly look at. I believe there's been some recent waiting restrictions have been put on A7 actually through Langham as well, but it's certainly in the first instance, well, a lot of these areas that when they go through planning. And the planning team will look at the local infrastructure, the roads, parking, etc. And if they have any issues, they would come to the roads department and ask for our advice on certain issues. But that's in terms of visitors increasing through the region and people stopping, that's something that we'll need to try and look at and balance. Right. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Councillor Thompson. Then Davis. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so it was just a couple of things just around, I think during the previous discussion we had asked about Annan getting a dedicated parking enforcement officer, and that I think most members kind of seem to support that idea, just given the size of the town. And just on sizes of towns, I'm looking at the Sistra report, and apologies if this has been raised in another place, but it seems to be based on the idea under section 2 on the overview of Annandale and Eskdale that something tragic has befallen the citizens of Langham, Gretna and Moffat in particular, because it's sort of half the population. So Gretna is around about 3,000 people, Langham's about 1,700 folk, 1,800 folk, Moffat's about 2,400 people. So I'm just wondering, did Sistra use it? Because I'm looking at the census data and just sort of just size of town. So I'm just sort of wondering if there's a wee bit of an error there that might have affected some of the conclusions they came to, because that's sort of basic data building blocks. And is that a known issue? And the other thing was just around resident parking. And at the moment, I don't think we charge for that. I think it's only in Dumfries where we have residents sort of parking zones. But clearly, is that an option? Because we could charge for that just now, presumably, but whenever it's decriminalised, we could designate where appropriate, and that's where local members might have a better input. You know, specific areas where you might have a case for residents parking zones, and there might be an appropriate annual fee for that privilege on the public realm. So is that something that we can look at more closely? And just a wee bit of word about the accuracy of the data in the SISTRA report. Thank you.
Yep, I did pick up on that as well. I just thought, I wrote, it seems dated, is what I've said, because my perception is the same as Stephen's in regards to that's page 58 in particular, 2.1.2. But I thought that these figures look inaccurate.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, I think was it regards to the populations? Was that, yes, yeah. We'll review those. There's a couple there that I think maybe just need updating. So apologies for that. With regards to the residents parking, there are 3 towns at the moment. There's some in Dumfries, Stranraer, and there is a small zone in Langham. With regards to charging for the residents, that was going to be part of, if you remember, as part of the Parking Commission, there was going to be a report done on the introduction of parking charges, and I think it was at the December committee, 2022 it could have been, but I think members at the Communities Committee had voted or suggested that they didn't want to see the progression of the introduction of parking charges, so that was taken off the table at the time, because one of the ideas was to charge a small fee for residents parking permits to cover at least the administration costs, and to look at parking charging for the discs, you know, the disc controls that you get for the 2 hours. So again, it's something we are looking at reviewing, and we have had a few requests for additional areas to be considered for parking zones in Dumfries, just to add a few extra streets, and we would welcome any suggestions if say, for instance, there was any areas in, say, Annan or Lockerbie or Moffat that residents would like to see come under the residents' parking scheme. We need to give it a lot of consideration, because it means that at the moment only 1 permit is issued per household. So if you do have a household with 4 cars, you're only going to get one permit to allow you to park in that zone, and not necessarily outside your own house. So it's very much residents' parking schemes need that local community buy-in, because I say not everybody just has the one vehicle. So, but it's something we are definitely looking into, Councillor.
Stephen.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting me back in, Chair, and thanks for that response. And I do appreciate that. You know, I'm certainly not proposing like charging for parking per se. I think, but there's a specific difference between depriving the general public from parking in the public realm, which everybody's entitled to, and providing a benefit for somebody who has a residence parking zone. I think that's, you know, I think we would accept that in cases of disabled spaces, because there's clearly an evidence need, and that's something that we recognise and want to support. But I think while residents often in certain places say, well, they should only allow residents to park in these bits, I'm thinking of Lockerbie, Wells Street sort of area where there's a conflict between the train station parking, etc. For example, it would be good to protect those areas, but you know, there's a case to be sort of made to say, well, that should come at some kind of recognition that those spaces are no longer available for anybody else, unless you have a residence parking sort of scheme. So I think we have to have quite a nuanced and very localised discussion. So I think that's something we should look to do, and through yourself. So thanks, Tony, for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Davis. Lynn?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It was just on the parking, the disabled parking in Moffat High Street, in the middle of the town, near the location where the phone boxes used to be. It's all been white lined, which I requested, but there is no, there's only one little sign and a little metal plaque, and there's biggest majority of the time there's cars sitting there that are not got disabled badges on it, and I was wondering if that could get looked at, because I've had quite a lot of complaints about it. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's an EMES, Tony, so that'll be picked up if you want to reply to that.
Okay, through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Davis. So, at the moment, as you know, any parking offences are still the responsibility of Police Scotland. We don't have the decriminalised parking enforcement powers at as yet. So, police will give priority to any offences where people are parking, causing an obstruction or affecting public safety. In my first part of my response would probably be that members of the public, if they do see these inconsiderate parking, or what they would like to call it, they can contact the police using the non-emergency 101 number and report it to them. Certainly, if you do submit an inquiry, it's something we can have a look at on the ground ourselves, maybe to improve, if it is just a case of maybe refreshing the lines as well in that particular area. But as I say,
the lines have been refreshed, Tony. It's just that the sign is very, very small in the first parking space, you know, and it's quite unnoticeable. But the lines have been refreshed, but not disabled marked at all on the spaces, just in front of them on the actual road.
okay.
But that's what the issue is.
Right.
The sign's really small in the first space on your left-hand side.
Thanks, Tony. So you'll be able to pick that up.
Spaces.
We can pick that up. Yeah.
Thank
It
you.
might be that these signs come in standard sizes.
Yeah.
And as long as they have to be located where people parking them can clearly see them. So it's something one of our team can look at.
I've got some photographs, and I'll send in an EMES. That's
Right.
fantastic. Thanks for answering that.
Thank you. Thanks, Lion. Thanks, Tony, for that.
Thanks.
So much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Cheers. So, members, don't see anybody else in. Or is Councillor Mail? Sorry, Dennis.
Page 61, 3.2.9. I just kind of missed this opportunity. We talk about more buses and rail here. Now, the big argument that has gone on for many years is, will the rail extend from Galashiels to Carlisle? And the argument is it should go down the old Waverley route through Newcastleton, in which case it doesn't literally touch Dumfries and Galloway, and there will not be a station in Dumfries and Galloway. The nearest one will be Longtown. And the argument has existed that it should actually come down the original route that was drawn for it, which brings it down through the Eskdale Valley. And that route still sits in the museum in Hawick as the one that was agreed, till it somehow got to the Houses of Parliament and or the Lord's House, and they got hold of it and changed it. And I don't know if money changed hands or what happened, but suddenly it went down that route. But I think there's an argument here that if it does go down the Waverley route, and it does happen, then we need to have it make a stop somewhere in Dumfries and Galloway between Carnaby and Langham, because I see this is very serious. Because if that was to happen and that didn't get in place, then the already poor bus service that comes from through the Lower Esk Valley, which is a 2-hour service to Carlisle, not into Dumfries and Galloway, would be, I think, destroyed even further. So I think this is a very, very serious issue, and one that Dumfries and Galloway Council needs to fight on behalf of the people of Lower Esdale to make sure that we do get a station. Now, it can come through Newcastle.
The only thing is, Dennis, I understand what you're saying. There's definitely a link, but it's this is a regional parking strategy we're looking at.
I can, but I'm just using
I know,
to pick it up. Because if we're going to talk about rail, then it's there.
Well, no, we're talking about parking strategy.
I know.
And decriminalisation of parking.
But I just don't want to miss the opportunity to raise it. And I don't think Dumfries and Galloway takes this seriously enough to push on and do something about it.
Right, spot on. Thank you. It's good of you to raise it. I'm just going to raise a very few points. I just wondered, so going back to Councillor Thompson's original question, which I noted myself, page 58, it was the information that's there. How does that, if it is seen to be inaccurate, how does it actually affect the wider proposals and questions and answers and strategy? Does it or does it? No, really, Tony. I can leave them open-ended if you want. That was the question that came into my mind when I read that. It does mention a few typos. It needs a proper proofread, like A74. Now, I kind of, it's a silly thing about A74M to be accurate. When as I was reading through this, before I got to end it, I'm thinking somebody definitely from out with the regions wrote this because of the kind of context, and they've grabbed a lot of the data from wherever they felt was the appropriate place. That was kind of, but I mean, in general terms, I thought it was a good strategy going forward. It's indicating all the right things. we should be agreeing it personally. That's what I thought by the time I got through it, got to the end of it. But there's some silly, I would just ask you a really good proofread, and if there's anything fundamental that data, if it's inaccurate, so I don't know if it is, but if it's inaccurate, I'll be the same as Stephen, looking at the figures that I understand. Would it actually affect the implementation of the strategy that moves forward? And was there a specific timeline in regards to the 2.3, which is outlined in 4.8 to 4.2, the decriminalised parking enforcement? Just to remind us of that, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for your question. Yeah, in the first instance, I think I mentioned here that the workshops that we undertook with the local members were undertaken in, I think they were in March and April time. And from after we undertook these workshops, that's when we started work on the draft strategy, and then obviously with the timescales for area committee, like the drafts almost have to be in a month before. So what I'm saying is it didn't really give us a lot of time, and we were aware that this is the first draft, and it will obviously be going through more checks. It'll be going through other internal stakeholders within the council. With regards to the point, I don't think I mentioned here that Annan is identified as a larger town centre within the local development plan, whilst Gretna, Langham, Lockerbie and Moffat are identified as town centres. So I think in the first instance, some of the work we do may be focused on Annan, and that is because you are the largest settlement here, one of the larger towns, you're the second largest town in Dumfries and Galloway. So Annan probably does get prioritised. After that, the other various towns will get prioritised in terms of we'll go out and check the signage for car parking, the wayfinding. So at the moment, there's nothing there that's going to affect, but we will have a proper review of the report. I think we just had to get it out for members and for internal stakeholders to review. So we will be coming back and after the summer recess in September with the final versions of this report, and it's still open. I ask all councillors now, if you still have any issues, concerns, additions that you'd like to see included in the delivery plan, please do so. See, the delivery plan, it's broke down into the various actions, short term, long term, and medium term. And unlike projects we're currently doing on active travel and road safety, etc., just to highlight, there is no money coming from central government. There is no external funding for parking. So any proposals that we put forward we'll need to find a budget from somewhere, and that'll be for the appropriate. That'll be for E&I committee to make those decisions going forward. So whilst we can do these studies and make recommendations to improve certain parking things, we will need approval. I did mention earlier about the money that we would get from parking fines, from decriminalised parking enforcement, and how we would use that initially to refresh parking, to refresh the lines, look at the lining, fill in any potholes, and focus on car parks, so that when we are issuing fines, people can't challenge us because they didn't see that there was double yellow lines on the ground. So we will be focusing on that sort of infrastructure first of all, before we move on to bigger improvements that will be identified in these delivery plans. Okay. Okay,
lovely. Thank you. Thanks very much. Right, members, don't see anybody else. Recommendations are 2.1 is note. Happy to note. 2.2, we're happy to agree. I think is what we're being asked. Is the draft regional parking strategy. We had the reassurance in regards to any potential typos, I think, or accuracy of information will be taken into consideration if needed to be amended. 2.3 is note the progress being made with the decriminalised parking enforcement application. Is outlined 4.8 to 4.12. Right. Sorry. Yep.
Sorry, could I just comment? I didn't answer your last question, which was on decriminalised parking. So we're at the stage where we're just about to submit the final application. So we're at step 5 of a 10-step process. That's the submission of the final application, where it will go now to Scottish ministers to review our application and for them to agree timescales. We are looking hopefully to have it probably by the spring of 2026, because that would be a sort of date we'd be looking to try and start enforcement. But that's still to be determined, and it's very much with the Scottish Government, because it'll go to their solicitors, as I say, because it is a legal process to remove the powers from the police to hand it over to the local authority. But that's what we're looking at. That's what we're hopeful at the moment by spring 2026.
Thanks for that, Tony, about a year away. I thought that was the case. You wanted to kind of in the public domain for those watching. First class, thanks very much, members. Thank you, Tony. We'll move on to item number 8. Next report is that members requested during our agenda setting following our March meeting. I'd like to thank Brian Scott for bringing this report, which provides an overview of the work and priorities on the environment team in Annandale and Eskdale in detail on path improvements and grass cutting schedule before us so promptly, which it is. It's really first class. You've got this here as quick. I know it'll get lots of comments and such like questions. I trust that the information contained within it addresses the areas that members were interested to learn about. So just before, Brian, so just hold on a wee second. So I'm going to ask members first in the room. I actually thought, so see in the appendix, you've got particular points where you focus on. I wonder, I see you're here too, Simon. Sorry, just picking up in there. Let me just skip to, I just thought it was really well illustrated, and I will skip to, I just wondered if you could have even outlined potentially. So that's right from the beginning. So you've got photographic evidence where it is, and you've got site location plans and such like. I wonder if you could have really just skipped through that. It crosses all the 3 wards in Annandale and Eskdale. Just give us a brief outline in regards to the work that's been done, where its location is. Most of us know where it is, but just in the potential even, I suppose, costs. And what I'm really keen to see, wasn't in particular my request is, I think, could it have been Councillor Marshall? It was Councillor Marshall, who's unfortunately he's not here today, but I think one of the things, you have got a minute budget, to say the least, to try and cover the amount of work, the extent of work that's potentially there across Dumfries and Galloway. And I'm very keen to get an understanding, here's the work, this is how much it takes, including volunteers, so on and so forth, but to try and meet the aspirations, I'm thinking just Annandale and Eskdale at the moment, so just Annandale, and we'll keep it local, the potential uplift it might be. And if that can't be answered today, hopefully we'll be able to resume that conversation at a different point in time, because it is short notice, it's right now, we haven't pre-warned or anything like that. So that's what I'm kind of thinking. If you don't mind, if it's yourself, Brian, or Simon, whoever's leading on it, I'm looking at page 80, and from there on, within that appendix, the report, so it's just get an understanding of where the sites are, what's needed, and so on and so forth as outlined. Thank you. I'll pass it over to whoever's got a lead in it.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I'll let Brian come in because he has the detail, and I wouldn't want to sort of steal thunder on these things. But just to highlight, just within the report, obviously that we are as a service still obviously meeting our statutory obligations under the Land Reform Act. So whilst things are tight and there is pressure there, we are still maintaining obviously sort of the statutory duties required. But I'll bring Brian in for those levels of detail that requested, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as described in the report, much of our work is reactive and relies on members of the public to actually report issues with our sort of infrastructure assets and overgrown pathways. However, we do have a forward programme identifying larger investments. And at the moment, 2 of the areas that we're looking at here is the Moffat Riverside Walk, which we know has a number of erosion problems and requires quite a bit of investigation. So at the moment, we don't know the cost of that, but we are gathering evidence to see what would be a sustainable solution. And on other riverside paths as well, we have the same issue, say in Annan as well, because the problems are sort of greater than just the pathways, the core paths, and where it's difficult sometimes to actually estimate where our to actually agree with landowners where our responsibilities are and where the landowner's responsibility is. This is a case, especially on flood banks, where some of our core paths are, and it's usually the responsibility of the landowner. But some landowners, understandably, are a little reluctant to actually repair some of these older flood banks, where the value of the land isn't that great that they protect. So we're looking at a number of areas where we're looking at longer term solutions to this, and this may sometimes involve diversions, which would have to be agreed by the Access Forum and the wider council committees as well. Most of the work that we're looking at, it's sort of just in time repairs, so it's small scale works. That's the majority. We're also looking at how we can better promote the core path network to the communities and the general public, and that will be working more with the information on the council website and also on the DG Trails website, which is our sort of showcase for our longer distance routes within the D&G area. What we will be able to, I'll be able to provide a more detailed program and estimates of the costs of that at a later meeting. But I hope that the paper just it's basically a snapshot of the issues that we're facing at the moment. And I suppose the greatest issue at the moment is managing the public's expectations of the standard of the core path network. Now, we currently are in year 3 of a 4-year contract with for priority path cutting, but that is the bare minimum that we can actually cut within the available budget that we have for path cutting. And at the moment, we haven't got a budget sum identified for next year at the moment. And from the number of inquiries we get, the paths, complaints or issues raised about paths, the number one issue is that they're overgrown. And again, it comes back to it's people's expectations. Most people do think that, you know, if we're promoting a core path, then it should be at least be accessible most of the time. So that is something that we need to remedy, I think.
Thanks so much for that, Brian. Much appreciated. Simon, anything you want to add to that before we open up to members?
Just briefly, Chair, and just through yourself, obviously we've got, as part of the capital monitoring report, we've got a report going up to economy and infrastructure, obviously on the 3rd of June, that highlights obviously our priority activities for this year in terms of budget makedown. But obviously, just to reiterate to members, obviously that our annual budget for path improvements is sitting just around about the £400,000 per year, spread across from Stranraer all the way across to Langham and everywhere in between. So obviously that resource doesn't go too far. The team have been fantastic in terms of securing additional resources where possible, and obviously working within sort of tight confines. But obviously happy to take any questions and support Brian moving forward.
Thank you very much for that, Simon. Open up to members. Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Driver first, Archie.
Yeah, thanks for your report, Brian and Simon. And I'm thinking probably further on rather than what this is about. And we've got, you know, Sustrans, Safer Routes, Coastal Paths. We've got a whole range of other projects going on that will increase the public access to paths. And I'm just wondering if there's funding available for them to maintain once they are in place, but also looking at the opportunity to work with community justice, because I know that they've done some work in the past in clearing paths, specifically between Eastriggs and Annan and Eastriggs and Gretna. So are you taking into consideration, you know, the new routes that may be coming into place in the next few years?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly come in, Brian, and then I'll bring you in for the other bits and pieces. Obviously, sort of in relation to our maintenance sort of budget moving forward, it's been identified. Obviously, our maintenance budget is non-existent following this sort of current sort of financial year. So obviously, we have got that down as a budget pressure and working closely, obviously, with the interim head of service to look at what we might be in a position to identify. Where we're looking at new routes, obviously there is an expectation that new routes put in would be able to be managed and maintained for a period of years without having significant maintenance burdens. But obviously it is something the long term we are looking at. But I'll let Brian come in just with regard to obviously the criminal justice element.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chair. Yes, we are starting re-engaging with criminal justice again to look at how we can utilise them to mainly cut some of the paths, and we've got a few meetings organised with them to try and get that underway this season. You also mentioned, Councillor Driver, that we are working now with Swestrans quite closely, and where possible, where the synergy that where we can improve a core path as part of a multi-user route. So that we're engaging with them in regard to the paths joining communities at the moment.
Thanks for that. Councillor Driver's content with that. So we've got Councillor Jimison, Brody, then Mail. George?
This is a wee bit of a geeky question, but from experience in past jobs, there is restrictions in interfering with the natural flow of a river or a burn. The farmers aren't allowed to build up a bank because it's eaten into their fields, for example. So is that been taken into consideration? And I note that on one of your recommendations is that you change the route of a path because there is erosion. The reason for natural flow is that we don't have straight rivers and we don't have straight burns. So I suspect that you're aware of that, and that's an obligation that you would have to take into consideration.
Yeah, Brian, just feel free to come in.
Yes, yeah, we work obviously within the regulations stipulated by SEPA, and a lot of these, we try to minimise work within watercourses, but where it's absolutely necessary, we work with and follow their guidelines. One of the things that we are looking at, obviously. Yeah, we're not trying to constrain watercourses, and we're looking at sustainable solutions to enable people to walk along safely rivers.
Well, thanks for that. I think a local example to us, George, is been there for many years. He used to go over the Annan River Gateway, but the Annan Bridge used there next to the town hall. I think when you turn left, go along the Newby Path, there's drainage under that. It's lifted up. It's like a flood. It's like flood embankment, but at the same time, there's drainage pipework underneath it allows the water to flow into the field, flood it, and then come back down. I think we have a lot of problems with that. I think just as a local issue, a local example, I think, because George and I are in the same ward, and it is Annan. But I think you're absolutely right, isn't it, Ken? You're 100% right. You can't stop. It's not right for a farmer to stop a floodplain when it's you'd have to go through get a particular licence and permission for that. So before I come in, Councillor Brody and Mail. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. It's 4.16, the Annandale Way and Copath 429 near Riverside Walk. I've got some graphic picture of the problems there. It's a very popular scenic route, and the council's involved in establishing it about 30 years ago. I've put in a number of EMS inquiries about it in the past, about the subsidence, unstable trees, and the fact that owners of properties behind it are concerned about how it will affect their properties. So the COPAS team don't have the budget for it, but there is a problem there. How are we going to? What's the solution to that? Where can we find the budget to to improve that area.
Richard, just before you come in, Brian, so I'm looking specifically, that was one of my questions, I think, now, so just so I'm clear, page 84, I'm looking on the report. Is it that place in particular, Councillor Roux, that you're alluding to? I think it is. So I'm looking at page 84, and it's you've got what you've got pictures of handrails, and it's got an identified location plan. I think that is identify the river.
Yeah,
walk, aye.
Yeah, lots of erosion. The surface is breaking up. The tarmac surface is breaking up badly. There's areas fenced off, and there's trees sticking out. Trees sticking out, which are causing more damage as well.
No, thank you. Just for clarity, just for myself. So I think it was just, I'll not bring that point up because you brought it up, but I'll maybe ask a supplementary question once Brian's answered your initial question. Brian.
Yeah, that's a prime example. It's a problem that obviously it's just not a matter of just fixing the tarmac. It's actually looking at the causes of that, and the riverside revetment walls do need a survey as well, working with our engineering colleagues and colleagues in community assets. So we're looking at pulling a team together to actually look at that and a sustainable long-term solution to that area. But in terms, and then a budget will have to be found for that as well.
Richard, just to make sure you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'll just have to keep on sending e-messages until it's sorted out, I think. So thank you.
I suppose the only comment I'll make then, because it is about a budget, it's understanding what the size of that budget would need to be allocated to a project like that, whether it's that or another, because you've given us many examples, but I'm like Richard, been lobbied many times. Clearly it's a structural defect there because the wall's moving, it's retaining the council's responsibility, is my understanding. So Councillor Thompson brought up I thought was an interesting point of the economy and infrastructure. I don't know if Stephen's still in, he maybe come back at some point, but he said, he identified that we're actually spending a lot of money. I think it's about £4.5 million is proposed to be spent on Dumfries headquarters, and that, so there could be a reprioritisation by elected members, and it's something I'll come back to as potential 2.4 going forward after when we get to recommendations, actually, because if members are serious at a local level, I feel very strongly. And we do want projects done. We have to look, as an area committee, we do have to look at identifying funds where we can deliver these projects. But anyways, I'll come back to that. Councillor Mail, Dennis.
Thanks, Chair. Page 74, 4110. The exploring how the Roman and Reivers route family trails could fit in to D&G. I mean, the perfect place for this to go is going to be the Canonby Langham route, because that's where the home of the Reivers is, up through there and up through the valley there. We've got the Armstrongs, you've got the Littles, you've got the Elliots. I don't know how it could be achieved, but with the active travel now looking seriously at extending the Langham Canonby route so that it actually fits the area now, then that would be one of the places certainly the Reivers route should be looking at if it can be achieved. So I'll just leave it there. But as I say, after the discussions that have gone on recently, say about holiday camps and the in-depth discussion that's now going on about finishing the trail from Langham to Canonby and probably on even to Carlisle, then if it could be done, that would be the place to explore it and take it.
Thank you, Dennis. You got any comments to make in regards to that, Brian or Simon?
Yes, the actual Romans and Reivers route is already a designated Scotland Grey Trail, and the route is defined. However, it's a bit of an orphan trail because I think it was established by the British Horse Society quite a few years ago, but it is another sort of underdeveloped route partially within Dumfries and Galloway and a little bit in Scottish borders. So what we're doing with the D&G Trails website is promoting these routes alongside the Southern Upper Way and Annandale Way and Windsor Galloway route as well. In terms of the route, I think we are looking at a core paths review over the next year, 18 months. And one of the things that we're wanting to do is look where there are gaps, strategic gaps within the core path network. And perhaps that is an opportunity then to actually look at that local routes that could be part of a strategic network and connect more places together.
Okay, thanks so much for that. I don't think I've got any other members, and I think we do. Luke, sorry, Luke.
Thanks, Chair. It's about a question about Core Path 492 on page 74 in Annan. You're obviously going to mention several works to repair the path, like diverting it, and 2 new bridges. I just want to come back to something you said earlier on about diversions, because my concern would be there if you to divert it on the lower riverside land, obviously it's still going to flood, as it mentions, and it would also damage that path. And with the 2 bridges, was that not already done about 2 years ago with a kind of temporary wooden bridge? So my idea there would be, could it be possible to divert it onto the Annandale Way between the metal bridge and the B721, which is Core Path 429? And also come back to the Path 492, there isn't any fences blocking access to it. I know young people, I don't know about anyone else, have been venturing down towards it. I know at one point when it was first closed there was a wooden fence erected, but it now just seems to be a pile of mud. So I'm wondering if a fence, either like wooden fence or an orange barrier, could be erected to keep it safe, please.
Brian?
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we keep monitoring that, and there has been fencing erected in the past, but it keeps getting removed or broken. In terms, it's a good example where we're proposing a diversion, and the path would be unsurfaced, so it wouldn't be damaged when it's flooded during high tides and high flow rates of the river. I suppose the diversion, yeah, we need to actually monitor the route where we've temporarily closed it off better for safety. Yes.
Okay, Luke, same with that. Thank you.
And also the route, the Annandale Way route on the eastern side of the river, it is obviously still open and available for people to bypass that temporary closed section.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself, just to provide some reassurance. Obviously, as Brian's reiterated, we'll keep obviously monitoring the fencing and look obviously at what we can get re-erected to obviously provide some reassurance for local members and for local members of the public. But in terms of the diversion, I think obviously sort of we're still exploring all options there. So obviously sort of as and when we get to a final point, we'll bring something back to committee to ensure members are kept up to speed with our sort of movement.
I just think we have asked for a specific report. I think Duncan MacDonald's got to bring it back to the committee regarding the 2 bridges, so it will be a conversation that could be picked up there as well. So any potential movements in that bridge or an alternative to what was there previously. But anyways, that'll definitely be a topic of conversation at that point. Thanks very much. Councillor Thompson. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just a quick one. So I think Core Path 318, or maybe 316, but it goes through High Tay anyway. I think there's issues there in terms of just access because of the styles, but it comes back to the point more widely about, obviously it's our duty as a local authority to promote core paths, but it's not necessarily our duty to maintain, other than to make sure that they're reasonably accessible to the public, and then there's all the responsibilities that go with that for people who use them. But I mean, presumably we're working well with in partnership with landowners and land managers, because if it's on, there's that right of access which we can promote. But in terms of keeping them accessible, is that something that we're proactive in terms of engaging with the relevant landowners? Certainly the Annandale Way is much celebrated and promoted as a visitor attraction to the region. But there's a number of landowners involved in that, all of whom will presumably be keen to make sure that, in partnership with community groups or land managers, to keep them accessible and attractive. So is that fairly consistent across the region, or is there some places where we have to develop a relationship with the relevant landowners. Thank you.
Just come in, Brian.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. It's most landowners are they know the legislation and work with us, and we work with them. And it's probably only a minority of landowners right across the region that create issues on the core path network. Overall, most landowners are very cooperative and willing to discuss how we can actually solve problems.
And just on the point about, I think it's core path 318, I think it is in IT. So I've reported that separately through the normal channels, but just, I think there's a few core paths been named today. So it was just, is that one that we can have a look at least, but appreciating that we've got stretched revenue resources.
Yeah, we're looking into that at the moment and seeing what we can do, Councillor Thompson.
Great, thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Don't see any other members coming in. So members, if we can note, it's actually all three for noting. It's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 as outlined within the report. But I just want to go back to my previous mention. Is this the appropriate time, or do we leave it to a different point in time? We'll probably get a collective, if there's 2 or 3 projects that we're looking for, that we try and identify a proper funding pot that we could refer back up to council at some point, even if it's closer to the budget time, members. But if I don't hear anything, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to hear 2.4, but I just want to at least sow that seed so you're quite aware, because Councillor Thompson, I thought, was very appropriate that the economy infrastructure, and it's directly relatable with the budget allocations for this particular department sit within that directorate, that actually that we have a £4.5 million capital spend identified for English Street, and would we want to prioritise it on the English Street headquarters, Dumfries Council headquarters, or wider projects like this? Yeah, my view would be very much the second, not the first. It'd be a waste of money on English Street stuff compared to this what the actual community benefit from. But that's a further conversation. So listen, thanks to both Brian and Simon very much for coming along today, getting the report written for us. You had a short time, lead-in time for that, much appreciated. I just wonder, one small ask for me is, could you touch base with Councillor Marshall at some point, just to, whether it's via email, phone call, whatever it may be, just to make sure, because he asked for this to come in specifically, he's been unable to make it here today, so just to make sure that his points were covered. I think Archie probably touched on them, but just to be absolutely sure if that's okay. I think he mentioned at the time that the gap between Greta in particular and Annan along the shoreline. But anyways, it would better come from Sean himself. Thanks very much. We'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much, board and members, for that matter. So, item, thank you. Item number 9, members. Thanks, Stuart. Right, disposal of the former Hutton Primary School, which is in Borland Primary School, for members who are not acquainted with that locality, away from Annandale North. I think have we got Colin Freeman on the call? We have. So Colin's got to speak to this one. So again, this is specifically a request for members of the direction in relation to any potential community interest in the future use of this building. But Colin, I'll ask you just to make 2 or 3 comments, say a wee bit to this rather than just have you got anything to add. But just in regards to that particular point, this is about community interest in particular, what you're expecting from the area committee today. Thanks, Colin. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report presents or asks members to identify any community groups that may be interested in the former primary school. We've reached out to the ward officer. The ward officer has identified that I think the Milk Community Council doesn't have an interest in it, but we do know that at paragraph 4.3, the Hutton Community Initiative do have an interest and have put in an expression of interest under the CAP process. But what we'll do, if members do identify any other community groups, I'll reach out to those community groups and explain to them what the process of disposal looks like and how they can actually access that process.
Thanks, Colin. So first members, so Carolyn's in the room. So Councillor Wilson, I'll give Carolyn a first chance, then I'll go to Councillor in alphabetical order, Davis, McGregor and Thompson, I think it is. So Caroline.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know of any other community groups, but I'm obviously aware of the Hutton the Hutton Initiative Group have already submitted a expression of interest. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for that. So again, I'll go Councillor in alphabetical order. Davis, McGregor and Thompson, if you've got anything. Lynn.
I've not aware of any community groups. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Gail.
Not aware of any others, and I know that the Hutton Initiative are doing a pair of work at looking what can be done with the old school and the site around it, so just to engage with them.
Thank you, thanks very much. And Councillor Thompson. Stephen.
No, nothing further to add, Chair, thank you.
Excellent, first class. Well, members, so we've been asked to note that the former Hutton Primary School, Bowland, along with the postcode shown as surplus to requirements, are shown as per the appendix. And recommendation 2 is to note as well that the community council and groups listed in paragraph 4.2 in the report have been consulted regarding potential community interest. And members are aware, so 2.3 is if we were to advise, elected members to advise, and from what I can gather, I know only went to Annandale North members, specifically, nobody else has come in, so they've identified that there is interest, but you've already identified that's within the report, so I don't think they've identified anything beyond what's contained within the report, so I think that's it, Colin. Thank you very much. Short and sweet, but worth the wait.
Chair.
Thank you. Right, item number 10, members, thank you very much. Thank you, Stuart. Excellent, cheers. So item number 10 is, it's land at Kilgreen. My eye was drawn to the thick black line, I think, as I read this one outlining the site. So it is our last report. It seeks our agreement to erect changing places toilet at Kilgreen in Langham, which is common good land. This project is a partnership between the council and the Eskdale Foundation in the town, which is being facilitated by the ward officer and community asset colleagues. Colin again is here to actually say anything, answer any questions, so on and so forth. Do you want a quick brief outline? This is the last one. It should probably short and sweet like the last one, I think, but I'll bring in the two actually. Councillor Gross was apologies, but I'll bring in alphabetical order Councillor Drysdale, then Bill, but Colin, to give you, no Drysdale, why did I say Drysdale? Drybrook, I can. Sorry, actually. I didn't mean to say driver. I'm not looking at as a female, honestly. Colin, so over to you. Have you got anything, a brief outline in regards to what's being asked here, and then I'll open up to members.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm being honest, Chair, you've summed it up perfectly. I don't really have anything else to add other than your synopsis. Okay. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, Councillor Dryburn, Archie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I'm glad this has come to where it is at the moment. I think Dennis and I had a discussion earlier on about where's the Eskdale Foundation in this report. You know, and it was never noticed, but since you said it in the opening remarks, that's fine. Happy to agree with the recommendations in this report, Chair.
Okay, excellent. Dennis?
Yeah, likewise, Chair, and with the further addition that we've just been told is going to happen, which is an active travel hub literally on the same site, I think this whole thing makes absolutely perfect sense and is really, really good news for the community. So welcome it, and thank you for finally getting it there, because it's been I think a struggle. Okay, thank you.
First class. I don't see any other members beyond Annandale and Eskdale looking to contribute at this time. Annandale East and Eskdale, sorry. Dennis fought for that hard, I remember it at the time. So members have been asked to note the location of the Kilgreen line, which is outlined in a thick black line as per the appendix. We've been asked to also note the background information provided at paragraph 4.1 to 4.4, which we discussed a little bit of that as well, and agree to the erection of a changing places toilet adjacent to the existing public conveyance facilities located at the Kilgreen line. So I'm just going to ask you one small question in regards to that particular decision. So you're asking the committee through the council, I should say, through this particular committee, to agree to the direction. Just outline where we sit in that decision making, because obviously the capital sums and so on is agreed elsewhere. Colin, what does that mean in real terms? Because when I read that, I just think, okay, that's just almost like giving you the permission because it's common good land. It's clarity I'm looking at that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report seeks the authorisation of the common good members to proceed with the project. The project is dependent on a shortfall in funding being met, but the next stage in the process is that should members agree that this project can go ahead on common good land, the land is inalienable, so once the funding has been sought, then an application will be made to the Sheriff to make the land alienable so the project can continue.
Okay. Councillor Mail, yep.
Yep, Chair, Langham does not have a common good fund because the old town council spent its money before it went to the district council, so it doesn't. It's the area committee that's the place for it, because there is not a common good committee in Langham.
So, I mean, if for some reason East and Eskdale members felt that there was a need for one, they could have one, just haven't got any money, but they've got assets. They've got the assets, East and wouldn't have any money to spend. So, members, with that clarity, 2.3, we're happy to agree 2.3. That's first class, thanks very much. Members, I thought we had a good any other competent business in March, which covers us right through to September quite comfortably in regards to further agenda items, of which we've got one today. So by that, I don't have any other competent business, and I wish you all the best and see you at the next area committee in September. Thanks very much.